7 years ago, I put my channel on the map with an analysis of Legend of Korra, a video that got explosively popular in which I had never expected to do so. I'd made it because that style of video looked like it would be fun to make, and as a result, I'd consider it the video on my channel that has aged the worst, especially with how much I was just aping another video that was popular for fun. I've always had plans to go back and revisit it completely, as I've actually softened a lot on Korra over the years. I've grown more fond of a lot of the characters, and I find the ideas the show pretends to explore rather fascinating. Korra as a series was extremely divisive. It was largely seen as a poor follow-up to The Last Airbender, and seemed to be following in the footsteps of similar franchise revivals of the time and trying to have the franchise grow up with the audience, as the 10-year-olds who loved Avatar were 17 when this came out. Unlike similar franchise revivals though, Korra was a uniquely political series trying to do to Avatar what the prequels did to Star Wars.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
Star Wars had always had this undercurrent of the Empire rose not in spite of the Republic, but because of it, that the prequels could practically rip apart, and were also written by someone with political literacy.
The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly.
Avatar, on the other hand, is a story that uses political language but of relatively simple concepts as fuel for a story about the power of friendship and diversity, written by two men who are like if the South Park guys are really into Studio Ghibli. So when Korra launched with a story about equality movements led by a pathological liar that nonetheless achieved what it wanted, a lot of people considered that to be a touch confused. Which is a shame, because Korra is patient zero for why adherence to certain dogmatic ideas about storytelling ultimately makes stories worse. Korra's good ideas, the places it excels and where it really shines, ultimately end up being smothered under the idea of peak animation. Let's not waste any more time and dive right in, starting with Korra herself. In terms of Avatar characters, hell, in terms of heroes in general, Korra is the most unique. There's a common trend in fantasy towards humility and reluctance to acquire power. There's a belief among most people that people who don't want to lead are the ones that make the best leaders, the ones who have no choice but to lead because they've been forced to.
I don't want the power.
Which is why you will make a great Avatar.
It's a trope that Avatar plays with a lot. Aang didn't want to be the Avatar and ran away from home, and then eventually has to accept that he is the Avatar and pull up his big boy pants and get to work. Roku is melancholy about leaving his entire life behind, but does ultimately make the effort. And most of the Avatar stories told since then tend to involve reluctance and loss. Kyoshi is reluctant and loses her mentors. Kuruk is reluctant and loses, well, everything. Yang Chen isn't necessarily reluctant, but she does lose her sister at a very young age. And this is fine, honestly. The hero's journey is an enduring template for a reason. It works. But Korra differs from them in that she actually wants to be the Avatar. And she doesn't just want to be the Avatar, she loves being the Avatar.
We were trying to keep our family together, to give you a normal childhood.
I never wanted a normal childhood. All I ever wanted to be was the Avatar.
Hell, her introduction was probably the best introduction any character with a special destiny plot could have. Before you even see her, you see her mother looking utterly exhausted in a house that has been completely trashed by a rambunctious little girl who just discovered that she could bend and has gone absolutely crazy with it. You get a good idea of the kind of character Korra is going to be just by the background painting. Then she finally appears and...
You gotta deal with it!
Okay, first of all, baby! Second of all, little baby Korra announces to everyone, I am going to cause problems on purpose. This sets up not only Korra's exuberance as the Avatar, but just how different she's going to be from Aang. Yeah, it might break the rules regarding bending, and how the fuck is a literal BB bending 3 out of 4 elements at once, but world building and metaphysics always take a back seat to characters. Avatar's magic system, as much as that phrase makes me want to gag, has always operated on an as the plot demands logic. I mean, the series was all about being the master of the 4 elements, and then in the last episode, oops, I forgot, here's the secret 5th element you never knew about. Well, technically there are 118, but let's just focus on the 5th. And it's a super secret mega bending that can alter someone's entire spirit and take away their ability to bend. And this is given to the Avatar so he can use it to take away Ozai's bending, and then is never used again at any point where it would be necessary. Remember the one episode where they brought up Jing? That it comes in positive, negative, and neutral forms and then never mentioned it again and replace it with chakras a season later? So yeah, all the rules get thrown aside because a baby bending 3 elements would be cool. And the rules are about as enforced as tax laws on those with 6-figure incomes. From the first moment she's on screen, Korra is not just willing to be the Avatar, she is utterly enthusiastic about it. She is putting her all into her training as the Avatar, and even in her first appearance, she's never shown to be arrogant.
Ever since you were a little girl, you've excelled at the physical side of bending, but completely ignored the spiritual side. The Avatar must master both.
I haven't ignored it, it just doesn't come as easy to me. But that's why I should start training with Tenzin immediately. He's Mr. Spiritual.
In the first season, Korra eagerly wants to train to become an airbender, but she's stymied repeatedly by the fact that her teachers are terrible.
Be the leaf!
But I don't know what that means!
Tenzin and his family might be great airbenders themselves, but that doesn't mean they're able to teach airbending to other people. The thing about the 4 nations is that they immerse themselves in very specific cultures that are inclined toward their element. The air nomads lived a very distinct lifestyle from the rest of the world to the point that there were no such thing as air nomads that couldn't airbend. But they're gone now, and all that's left is what Aang remembers, and Aang was 12 when he went into the ice. So Tenzin having to go from teaching his children from birth to teaching Korra is about as smooth and natural a transition as global diplomacy during an actively ongoing genocide. Korra actually gets her first real airbending lesson from Bolin of all people. While teaching her the basics of pro bending, the first thing he stresses is how she needs to stay light on her feet and remain agile, a basic skill in a professional match where you have to always dodge enemy attacks, but also just the basic approach to airbending.
Somebody's a little light on his feet.
This is the first time airbending really clicks for Korra, as she uses this along with Tenzin's previous lesson about spiral movements to win the match later in the episode. So Korra is one of the rare instances where a student questions her teacher and is right to do so. Granted, Korra's difficulties with airbending are a direct result of the way the White Lotus isolated her and taught her in seclusion, keeping her from going on a journey that would have given her perspective on the world and immersed her in the culture of every nation. By the time she returned to Air Temple Island, she may have actually been more receptive to the training, but kept in the compound and away from the real world, Korra was set up for failure from the start. Which is why it's all the more noteworthy that Korra is the most powerful avatar to exist. Really stop and think about it, Korra is being trained in old-style bending during a time where bending has eclipsed the skills of characters back in the original series. During Aang's time, lightning was so rare among firebenders and required such strong control that anyone who could actually shoot lightning was considered a prodigy. In the series, I think we only see 3 people do it, and they're all Fire Nation royalty. Cut to 70 years later, and lightning benders are working blue-collar jobs. Gangsters are shooting lightning. Street urchins are mastering lightning. Metal bending was considered impossible, but Toph discovered it because she had a mastery of seismic sense that nobody else ever needed. And even in the series itself, metal bending is very crude. 70 years later, metal benders are all over the place, and the art has been so perfected that they can bend metals other than iron and steel, and they no longer need direct contact with it. Metal benders are controlling the infrastructure of entire cities, giant robots with laser beams attached to their arms, and fucking maglev trains. And just on a hand-to-hand level, metal benders are unmatched by anyone else. Blood bending was so difficult it could only be done during the full moon. Outside of the full moon, it's impossible. Against a stronger waterbender, it's impossible. Now people are doing it outside of the full moon and even doing it without moving their hands, and they can even bloodbend the fucking Avatar, the most powerful waterbender in the world. Side note, good job Katara teaching Korra to defend herself against bloodbending. And bloodbenders have even managed to learn to sever people from their bending, an ability that previously only the Avatar ever had. Waterbenders are getting closer to Avatar level bending than anyone else in the world. The average bender in Korra makes the prodigies of The Last Airbender look like chumps, so Korra is coming up in a time where bending has evolved and secrets once held by kings are available to everyone, and she is stunted by isolation with poor teachers, and she still manages to overcome them. Yeah, she might get bounced across the countryside like a combination Super Bowl and Rube Goldberg machine in the process, but she does ultimately win. Psychic Bloodbender? She wins. Great Spirit of Chaos inhabiting the chief of the Water Tribes? Not only does she win, she does it without the Avatar spirit. Airbender with none of the ideological psychological restraint, she kicks his ass while she's dying of mercury poisoning. Crazed metal bender? Yeah, she loses at first, but then comes back and wins. Hell, energy bending is supposed to be just about controlling the energy in the body, and she uses it to deflect a laser beam bigger than a skyscraper at point-blank range. If Korra had been properly trained by teachers who knew what the hell they were doing, she would have been absolutely terrifying. She would have been able to make a gang war stop just by arriving. She's met with every disadvantage possible, and she still manages to kick ass at the end of the day. And she's that strong because she's the only Avatar who wants to be the Avatar, who loves being the Avatar, who revels in being the Avatar. The world said you have to give yourself to the 4 nations, and she said, hell yes. Which is why it's all the more disappointing that the show barely lets her be the Avatar. From the first season all the way through the 3rd, Korra is chased around by a squad of babysitters who refuse to let her do her job. Hell, this is what the blurb for the 2nd episode says about her.
But will this cool, calm, collected master of air be able to tame this hot-headed teen?
The early first season has Korra showing a passion for Republic City that literally nobody else has, not even the viewer, but she's constantly yanked back on her choke chain whenever she expresses it. And at nearly all times, her agency is ignored as she's being moved around for her protection, especially where the White Lotus is concerned. There is barely a single moment in the first 3 seasons where Korra's ability to even be the Avatar isn't being held back by someone telling her she's not ready, or trying to shelter her to protect her, or just butting in for no clear reason and refusing to explain themselves. They try to justify this incessant hovering in each subsequent season, but the problem with the hovering isn't that it isn't explained or justified, it's that it's boring. This is the main character of your show, and she isn't allowed to have any agency until she vanishes from the plot. This is going to sound childish, but it doesn't matter how well you explain it. I want to see the cool muscle lady do cool muscle lady things. Down in front, Tonrock. There's something a little, what's the word, utterly disgusting about showing us one of the coolest characters you'd come up with since Toph, and then putting her on a leash for the vast majority of the series. Aang was 12 and he didn't have someone hovering around him like a fussy mother. I'm sure people who ship Zutara would disagree with that, but I'm not in the delusion war to ask them. This is all wrapped up rather poetically in season 2, which is the first time that all of this actually gets questioned. To the writer's credit, Korra is increasingly aware of the way in which she's babied, but the problem is that doesn't change. She expresses her frustration and tries to break away from the handlers, but in nearly all instances she's cast as being foolish and naive for doing so. In season 2, we learn Korra has been left in the dark about the dark spirits attacking at the northern and southern portals, which isn't surprising. If the compound for Avatar training shows us anything, it's that the White Lotus has been consistently setting Korra up to fail and keeping her in the dark about many things that she, as the Avatar, should know about. It would also be interesting to really unpack the disservice that the White Lotus have done to Korra. Korra has been training to be the Avatar since she was 5, and has been raised on the compound for just as long, so not only has her childhood been stolen from her, she's been given the worst possible version of mastering the bending arts, meaning that in terms of most Avatars by her age, she's technically weaker, less disciplined, and more impulsive, more prone to making catastrophic mistakes, and most importantly, she's more gullible. And this would all be interesting character work if they did anything with it, but they don't. Just look at this bit.
It would be my honor to instruct you in the spiritual ways of the Water Tribe.
I wouldn't mind learning about fighting spirits. Airbending is getting pretty boring.
Tenzin is Korra's instructor. He can give her all the training she needs.
Korra, an adult woman, and the fucking Avatar made a decision about her training, and her father steps in and overrules her. He does it multiple times without even bothering to explain himself to his daughter. None of this is helped by the fact that Korra's excellent characterization in season 1 backslides horribly in season 2. Korra becomes more impulsive, more childish, more dismissive of everyone around her, and snaps at her boyfriend over nothing. And this is because it's setting her up to take a fall for trusting Unalaq after the second act reveal that he's actually a Satanist. Before this point, Korra is spending most of the season battling against people who just won't let her actually be the Avatar. Her uncle ends up being one of the few people who respects her as the Avatar. Korra actually really starts coming into her own because of this, and is even able to de-escalate the war between the North and South multiple times. But all this gets thrown away when it's revealed that she's just playing completely into Unalaq's hands. So Korra actually being the Avatar and being good at it is immediately recontextualized into her being a rube, and retroactively justifying the behavior of everyone who was smothering her and talking over her. So So Korra gets to push back against the dismissive attitudes of the men around her and is immediately made the fool for doing so. Look, can we stop treating her like an idiot child? Korra wants to be the Avatar, let her be the Avatar. Hell, you know how when Aang is fighting Ozai and he gets warped at one point only to go into the Avatar state and then it's game over, victory Aang? Multiple times in fight scene, Korra will go into the Avatar state, make some declaration of victory, the music hits that crescendo, and she gets warped almost immediately. And this repeats multiple times before the plot says, okay, time for the main character to win now. She pulls off the most impressive feat imaginable by fighting Unalaq with her own spirit without the Avatar spirit, and she still gets murked and has to be saved by Jinora, just to do the exact same thing she just failed to do. It'd be one thing if she was pounded into mulch once before pulling out the Avatar state and going ham on someone, but it usually happens multiple times and she usually has to be saved by Jinora. She gets saved by Jinora in season 2 during her kaiju fight, she gets saved by Jinora in season 3 when Zahir tries to suffocate her, she gets saved by Jinora again in season 4 when Kuvira defeats her. This is 3 times in 3 seasons they pulled out the Jinora Ex Machina. You can almost hear a record scratch every time Korra pulls out the oh shit I mean business power and then gets crunched anyway. This goes hand in hand with the babysitters. People argue that the training in the compound makes sense because we already saw the other elements in the previous series, but that is a gross misreading of the Avatar's journey in the first place. The journey isn't just about learning how to do magic shaman mixed martial arts. The journey itself is symbolic. The Avatar has to represent the entire world, and that necessitates becoming a part of the culture of every corner of it. Given the original series was strongly anti-imperialist, this was something every character was fighting against. Furthermore, it's also a coming-of-age story. Fucking kill me. As the Avatar journeys out on her own at 16 and gains independence from not just her family, but her own nation, doing the fantasy equivalent of backpacking across China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, and Canada, apparently. The journey isn't just an excuse plot, it's an entire character arc in the macro in which you can fit any adventure you want. You don't get to be a fully realized Avatar until you've completed your character arc. But Korra is set on her character arc with only the Avatar state left to go, and then she's just given that. At no point does Korra get to put in the work for anything, and she wants to put in the work for everything. Korra is characterized as headstrong and hardworking, and she is repeatedly denied the ability to demonstrate those things. Oftentimes her story just gives her missing powers at the moment it would be the most dramatic. So why does Aang get to make all the decisions on his journey at 12, but Korra doesn't? Well, the in-universe answer is because of either Aang, the White Lotus, Tanrak, or the Red Lotus, depending on which season it is. But the out-of-universe answer, well, Bryke and writing women have never really gone well together. Even when Bryke writes female characters well, they still conform to very strict and rigid gender stereotypes. Katara is one of the best female characters ever written, but she's still a character whose arc is about calming down and being gentle. Azula is a very compelling look into what happens to a golden child when the scapegoat gets away, but the story goes out of its way to paint her as irredeemably evil at 14. Uniquely evil, in fact.
I know what you're gonna say. She's my sister and I should be trying to get along with her.
No, she's crazy and she needs to go down.
Man, I'm so sad about my dead son, and I hope my nephew doesn't go down the same path. My niece, on the other hand, oh, she can fucking choke. So both Katara and Azula end up conforming to traditional gender norms. In fact, you could take Cassandra Yatrin's gender study analysis of Sailor Moon, swap Serena and Beryl with Katara and Azula, and nothing would change. So what do Bryke do with Korra? Well, they do the same thing they did with Katara, repeatedly beat her down until she calms down and humbles herself. A lot of Korra's encounters with main villains involve rather extensive and prolonged shots of Korra writhing in agony and being tossed around like a rag doll that Aang was never really subjected to. It often reminds me of the way modern video games tend to put their female characters through a level of gory and brutal violence that their male counterparts don't have to go to. I always come back to season 3, where an entire episode is dedicated to Korra having mercury painfully absorbed into her skin, and then she thrashes around in agony for 10 minutes, and then when she goes into the Avatar state and escapes, she's thrown against the rocks and cliffs to bounce around like a tennis ball in a washing machine, while Janet Varney practically murders the concept of voice Foley. Or hell, here's Aang being bloodbent.
That's like my brain has a mind of its own! This feels weird!
Now here's Korra being bloodbent.
Your
in my way, Avatar.
When Aang is getting tossed around in a fight, it doesn't linger on shots of him ragdolling around the room. You aren't forced to listen to every agonized grunt and moan that Zach Eisen can possibly muster. Aang can get electrocuted in the back, and the whole thing is shot as if trying to give him dignity, with a dramatic zoom in to the one responsible and his descent to the ground, broken by Katara, who sweeps him to safety. Meanwhile, Korra is smacking into the ground at terminal velocity, spared no dignity as she rolls over the rock, every second filled with her agonized screams. And I wonder what all of this is in service of, because it isn't engaging to watch, it just makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable to watch any character without any agency being tortured. Aang gets to meet his attackers head on and fight them as equals, while Korra is either getting curb stomped immediately, or she's chained up being slowly murdered with poison over an entire episode. Oh well, Lily, Korra's just a darker, more violent show. No, it's not, because just a few episodes prior, the Red Lotus proceed to beat the shit out of Tenzin while he's already injured and unable to fight back, and the camera slowly pans away to give him dignity. This is 2 episodes before the Mercury snuff film, so why does Tenzin get to have dignity in this torment, but Korra doesn't? This is a recurring and worrying trend that didn't start with Korra, but Korra certainly helped normalize it. And if I had to sit here and explain to you how everything about a character suffers when you're wasting time on gruesome, almost pornographic displays of pain and suffering, then honestly, I can't explain it to you. It'd be like asking me to explain to you why oxygen is important. If you don't already know, I'm not equipped to fix that. Korra is such a cool character, but Bryke is so fucking weird about women. One of the first things she does in the non-action part of the series is beef with some other girl over the most unremarkable guy in the universe. If that doesn't reek of this was written by weird men to you, then you're probably a weird man. It doesn't really stop after that either. It remains a consistent thorn in the show's side for its entire runtime. Season 4 is where Korra gets away from her handlers, but then she spends most of the season not really doing anything, and that still doesn't stop her from being everyone's hacky sack. She gets tossed around an earthbending arena, she gets tossed around by Toph, she gets tossed around by Kuvira, she spends most of season 4 bouncing off the dirt like she's just been kicked by your Forger. So we go through multiple seasons of physical and emotional torment that's framed in a more perverse and gruesome manner than any other violence in the franchise, and we do it for what? Well, funnily enough, I did actually get my answer. To show Tomb Raider just above, I needed footage of Tomb Raider's gruesome violence, so I went on YouTube to steal it from someone and I found this. And fucking hell did that thumbnail give clarity. And now I'm reminded of the new She-Ra, which advertised itself as a fun show for girls about saving the world, but then the show they aired was about someone being relentlessly pursued by their possessive sociopathic sister, and which dedicates plenty of time to perversely watching Adora get beaten, bludgeoned, tortured, mind-controlled, and perved on, and the response I often heard from fans as to why this was supposed to be appealing was often, because it's hot. I can understand people who like The Passion of the Christ. I can also understand people who like The Coffin of Auntie and Lele. I get it, you're disgusting and will never see the light of heaven, but I get it. What I don't get, and will never understand, is people who like a children's cartoons from the 80s secretly being both of those things. Once is by chance, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern, and 4 times is an established genre. This isn't about violence in and of itself. This is about the framing of violence. The writers would have never chained up Aang and poisoned him through his skin while he writhes and shrieks and screams, but they do shit like this to Korra a lot. The treatment Korra receives is disappointing because Korra better deals with adversity when that adversity isn't just gruesome torture porn. Half the first season deals with Korra's profound fear of losing her bending, and given how much of her character is about enthusiastically being the Avatar, a villain who could take away her bending is probably the best personal antagonist she could have. We'll get more into Amon later, but if he was just the anti-bending equivalent of a serial killer, that season would have been a lot better. Ironically, fighting Amon teaches her more about how the Avatar is more than just an elemental karate master than most of the other characters do in the same season, and it doesn't need torture porn to do it. The second season, before it goes off the rails, deals with the inferiority complex Korra has as a result of all of her babysitters talking over her and keeping important information from her, treating her less like the Avatar and more like a feeble turtle duck, to the point that Korra is genuinely surprised when Unalaq tells her she has to handle the spirit portal herself. Nobody's ever just let her do her job before. The third season has Korra dealing with finally getting to be the Avatar, trying to deal with the spirit vines before dedicating her time to the new airbenders and how they're caught up in a conspiracy plot with the Earth Queen, at least until the Red Lotus shows up, derail the entire story, and her babysitter starts smothering her again. The final season has Korra dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, but also her own shortcomings as the Avatar, and while it doesn't address that most of these shortcomings are the result of external factors beyond her control, it's marginally interesting, more so than watching Toph bounce Korra off every every tree in the swamp like the world's screamiest ping pong ball and forcing her into a room with her abuser to be given spirit therapy by him. But something about Korra's arc in the final season always rubbed me the wrong way, and it took me several years to realize it. Korra's recovery from her trauma is about rewinding that trauma back to before it happened. When you go through a heavy amount of trauma, it can affect you in ways that can't be undone. And I'm not talking about triggers or trauma responses, I'm talking about the way your experiences influence you as a person. You can't go through the kind of extreme torment Korra has put through and not come out of it with some opinions on the matter. I speak from experience here, having had a gruesome childhood that has left me with very strong opinions on how parents should treat their children, how parents shouldn't normalize sibling abuse, and how the education and medical systems treat children who are inconvenient. And whenever a creative work brushes against my own experiences with trauma and especially abuse, I find they decidedly lack consideration of this. This isn't to suggest that trauma makes you wiser, but it does at the very least make you think about the things that caused your trauma in the first place and how to actively avoid them. And in most cases, people target Korra specifically because she's the Avatar. Amon tries to take her bending because she's the Avatar. Zahir tries to kill her to end the Avatar cycle. Unalaq rips Rava out of her and destroys it, but tellingly leaves Korra alone after that. Without Rava, she isn't the Avatar anymore. She's just his niece. Being the Avatar is the reason Korra has had all these people after her. It's paralyzed her, poisoned her, had her violated in more ways than one, and hurt her so badly that she can't even do her own job. Given how much Korra loved being the Avatar, this would be the best reason for her to disappear for 3 years. How do you deal with the fact that the one thing you always wanted to be is directly responsible for every single ounce of suffering you've ever experienced? It's easy to love being the chosen one when you're 5 and all you have to worry about is training. It's a lot harder when the reality of being the chosen one slams you into a mountain 17 times. Do you even want to be the Avatar anymore? Do you need to be? The world seems to be doing just fine without you. You're the Avatar, you're supposed to help fix the Earth Kingdom, but your friends are handling that in your stead, and they've all decided to let you recover at your own pace. There's this cross-section between Korra's duties as the Avatar, her wavering desire to be the Avatar, and that unspoken act of sincere love from all of her friends that would be interesting to explore. If Korra came back and said she's at her limit and can't be the Avatar anymore, how would people take that? This is only briefly lampshaded, as Korra remarks to Toph that she's supposed to be the one out there helping the world, and Toph calls her out for deliberately prolonging her recovery, but past that, it's never brought up. The season switches to being about stopping a villain, so we don't have time for any of that, and it doesn't seem like they wanted it to be about that anyway. The Avatar can't just decide not to be the Avatar. Well, they could, nobody's stopping them. Instead, once Korra gets the poison out of her body and reconnects with Rava, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with her after this point. Furthermore, it's a little weird that this is happening now of all times. By the time of season 3, Korra's been through enough traumatic events that you could call her the Banshee Queen, yet it's only Zahir that really sticks with her. Not Amon terrorizing her for months and stealing her bending, not Unalaq ripping out her very soul and destroying it, which Korra was feeling every ounce of pain from. No, it's this and only this. I've heard some argue that this is especially traumatic, but I strongly disagree. I think what she went through in season 2 is worse and should have been at the forefront of her PTSD. The problem is that the writers hadn't thought to give her a PTSD arc by then. Season 3 is the only season written with the knowledge that there was going to be another one next, which is why it has multiple long-lasting negative effects on the world and the characters that doesn't get tied up in a neat little bow at the very end. And that's about the only reason that Korra is dealing with any of this now as opposed to 2 seasons ago. It's also why the world-ending dark evil god of darkness and destruction happens in the 2nd season when most people would have saved that for the finale. We never really get to deal with this. Once Korra reestablishes her connection with Rava, that part of the story is just over. It's time to move on to the big robot shooting its big gun. All of this has meant that Korra, an otherwise A-tier character, never gets to come into her own. She doesn't get to have the breadth of experience, belief, and agency that her predecessor had, and she is frequently shunted around the plot either by her handlers or by a sledgehammer. And what time that could have been spent fleshing her out as a character is instead spent on fan service. No, not that kind of fan service.
No! Not my cabbage corp!
This kind of fan service. The Legend of Korra has far too many characters, and half of them have the severe problem of having to deal with the legacy characters. Now, a large cast is fine, but if you're struggling to make your main character work, it's probably not the best time to introduce an entirely new Team Avatar, the children of the old Team Avatar, an entire rogues gallery of villains, and more side characters than you can shake a stick at. In fact, let's get to shaking that stick, shall we?
We don't know what we did, but somehow we did wrong. So every time we screw up, we just say
sing this stupid song.
The Krew is the new Team Avatar, and was actually the establishment of the trend of Team Avatar. The Last Airbender had its Team Avatar more as a consequence of character-driven storytelling. Every character-driven episodic series had an ensemble cast, so Avatar did too. Legend of Korra was the first time Team Avatar as a concept was codified, so the Avatar has their friends and teachers and several animal companions making up their ensemble cast. Later attempts to expand on Avatar Kyoshi and Avatar Kuruk would give them similar teams. It's reached the point where Team Avatar in this exact composition is not just expected, it's considered mandatory. The Avatar needs someone of each bending style, they need a token non-bender, they need animal companions. It reminds me of The Legend of Zelda. Link needs the Master Sword, he needs the green tunic, he needs certain items or it isn't a Zelda game. This ends up happening once a franchise goes multiple iterations while retaining the same tertiary elements. People boil down a series to the tassels and decorations, and as a result, the characters included to adhere to that become more and more hollow because they're just filling a mandatory role. Several videos ago, I pitched an idea for a successor to Korra, Avatar Neva, a rather flighty and skittish avatar who cowers behind her sister and has an arc about stepping out of the safety of her sister's shadow. And after I gave that, the first thing the comments started asking me about was animal companions and their team. And after I said multiple times, there were none, only her sister, some people got bored and went to go do something else. And to an extent, I can understand that. It's hard to ignore the story in favor of shipping when the only two permanent characters are siblings. Not impossible, but whenever a franchise has a trope that is considered mandatory to its identity, the healthiest thing that the creators can do is completely do away with it before familiar expectations start creating problems. And that starts now, because the Krew is here because Aang had a Team Avatar, and so Korra needs a Team Avatar. No, really, that's the in-universe reason.
The arena might be shut down, but we're still a team! The new Team Avatar!
So let's break them down one by one. Out of everyone in the Krew, with the exception of Korra herself, Bolin is actually the best of the bunch. Mostly because he's the only one with a personality. In general, Bolin's always been exceedingly nice, and some people find that boring, but it's hard to get invested in a character who isn't friendly from the start. His brother starts out the show very closed off and standoffish, and as a result, he never really gets past that because he doesn't have a good first impression to build on. Bolin, by comparison, is a lot more charming, and he contrasts Korra very well. Korra is really assertive and enthusiastic, while Bolin is rather laid back and easygoing. Ironically, we have a waterbender who thinks like a firebender and an earthbender who thinks like an airbender. This means that unlike the other two, Bolin establishes a much better relationship with Korra almost immediately. Granted, he is trying to date Korra, but that friendliness doesn't vanish when the plot shoots him down. He's just the most well-adjusted person in the cast in season 1, and the moment the love spirograph starts, he immediately backs out of it, which is a shame because I honestly think Korra would have been better off with Bolin.
Oh no, they've come to revoke my Sapphic license!
I mean, come on, look at this.
You and me, we could go get some dinner together, sort of a date situation.
Oh, that's really sweet, but I don't think so. I don't feel very date-worthy.
Are you kidding me? You're the smartest, funniest, toughest, buffest, talentedest, incrediblest girl in the world!
You really feel that way about me?
That's so cute! That's the most adorable thing this franchise has ever had! And the two of them are just really adorable together. There's an entire group of scenes of their date, and it's genuinely some of the most heartwarming material Avatar has ever produced. Find yourself a man who will have a belching contest with you. Unfortunately, this same episode starts the Korra, Asami, Mako love triangle that would persist for about half the fucking show. So both of them actually pull a huge dick move on Bolin when they kiss after their match, and it causes a lot of tension between the three of them. Mako accuses Korra of using Bolin to get back at him, and unfortunately, Korra confirms that. It's uncharacteristically mean for a character who was genuinely portrayed as very good-hearted up until this point, but it only takes one more match for the two of them to hash things out, and Bolin's actually pretty good about it since Korra apologizes for messing with him like that.
Bolin, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to let things get so out of hand.
I'll be alright. But we had fun together, didn't we?
I had a great time, honestly. You are one of a kind, Bolin.
Please, go on. I enjoy praise.
So this arc between the two of them is short, but even when it does get mean-spirited, it's still rather well written. I like that it doesn't take them half the season for Korra and Bolin to patch things up. I honestly think there was a missed opportunity to not explore this further. The love triangle lasted for 2 seasons and pissed off the viewers so much that Bright didn't touch it again until the 11th hour when they just decided to make the most popular ship in the fandom canon. Once this ends, Bolin ends up taking a back seat to Korra, Mako, Asami, and the gang's crotch goblins for the rest of the season. The Krew in general seems to struggle hard with finding purpose in this season outside of a love triangle and bending fights. And this problem only persists further and further into the series, and I think part of this was making the entire Krew at all. The original series just had Aang, Katara, and Sokka in season 1, before picking up Toph halfway through season 2, and then Zuko halfway through season 3. In a rather notable example, both the latecomers didn't have much development after the fact because Toph was already perfect, and Zuko's arc was drip-fed through the entire series up to this point. Korra crams the entire Krew into just a 13-episode season, where it has to share time with a lengthy political subterfuge plot. The excuse is that this was the only season they thought they were going to get, but you know, you didn't need to rebuild Team Avatar exactly as it existed last time. This copy-paste job doesn't fit in the template they're working with, and so they shouldn't have done it. Out of everyone in the cast, Bolin is tied with Korra for the most shafted character in later seasons. After a very strong opening where Bolin ends up being the most well-rounded character in the Krew, he gets demoted to comic relief and rube multiple times. Half of season 2 is devoted to him getting into an abusive relationship with Korra's cousin Eska, a cold and brutal woman who brings her brother with her on double dates and sees a partner as synonymous with slave. And hey, if that's your thing, more power to you, but the combination of Bolin's very visible distress and every other character practically laughing at his situation is just fucking disgusting. And when he gets away from Eska, he moves on to starring in weirdly racist propaganda films. I don't have much to say about Nuktuk beyond that. It's a Flash Gordon thing, that's it. However, as the season starts wrapping up, Bolin really comes into his own as a character. He's a much more powerful earthbender and still ride or die to help Korra with anything. He's the only one who really resents the fact that Team Avatar is effectively broken up, and when it's time to actually fight, he gives it his all. And as much as Bolin is a rube doing propaganda films for a rich bastard who's staging false flag attacks, he is ultimately doing it for Korra, who needs help protecting her tribe, which is more than can be said for Mako and Asami. I mean, granted, Asami tries, but we'll get to that. However, in season 3, the entire Krew falls off. I mean, season 3 in general is just awful. Bolin and Mako get to reunite with their extended family, giving us the sweetest moment in the entire series.
I know from looking at you two that she must have been a wonderful bride for my boy.
I'm sure they would want you to have this.
But he also has a minor arc about trying to metal bend alongside Korra and failing to achieve it, before realizing later on that he can actually lava bend, which honestly is just a cooler technique than metal bending. Sure, metal bending has a lot of beautiful and elegant precision that really gets to be demonstrated in season 3, largely thanks to one very nice Zaofu guardswoman who I'm sure will go on to do wonderful, lovely things with the art form. But metal bending's uniqueness has been lost in Korra, becoming just a fancier earthbending, where metal bending in Avatar was a lot more crude and inelegant, and in that way it was more unique. Lava bending, on the other hand, ooh, that's beautifully crunchy. So yeah, I like that Bolin gets the meteor of the specialized bending styles. But after that, he really doesn't do anything. His character just sort of... In season 4, he ends up joining Kuvira's army, seemingly to help people and to give Korra space to recover, but actually because he's the only member of the cast considered to be stupid enough to fall for Kuvira's bullshit. And that's a bad decision, but Kuvira as a villain was just always a bad decision. Granted, his last really good moment does redeem the rest, and that's when the giant death robot of anti-colonialism is destroyed. Mako decides to risk himself to destroy the spirit Vine Core with lightning, and him and Bolin share a goodbye hug and say they love each other, and after Mako gets knocked out, Bolin doesn't hesitate to come back to an exploding Vine Core to get him out. It speaks to an aspect of Bolin's character that I feel goes unappreciated. Bolin would walk into the circles of hell for the people he loves, especially his brother, and he does it repeatedly throughout the series. Bolin isn't a particularly powerful earthbender, not like Toph and not like Korra, but that doesn't stop him from rushing into battles far above his caliber without hesitation. In season 2, both him and Mako take on Unalaq to hold him off so Korra can close the spirit portal, and if it weren't for harmonic convergence happening at that exact moment, they would have succeeded. In season 3, he often has to contend with Ghazan, and in their first fight, he's no match for Ghazan's lava bending, but once he has it, it becomes clear that lava is so dangerous that Ghazan has been able to win by sheer power creep. Against another lava bender, he just can't really hold up, and so he just kills himself. Even when Bolin is up against things so far beyond him that they're terrifying, it doesn't stop him going in to help his friends, especially Korra. It's like the man knows no genuine fear, and I think this goes unappreciated because the show never stops to verbally acknowledge it. Like in the original, everyone believes Katara to be motherly. And why? Well, because there's a scene where they go, "Man, Katara sure is motherly. Doesn't she act motherly? It's not always a bad thing." And this is often why Katara gets reduced from a very interesting and nuanced character to just motherly, especially in adaptations, because the story ground to a halt to talk about sibling enmeshment for a few minutes, and that's what people picked up on. Along the same lines, Bolin often gets reduced to just dumb comic relief, because characters often verbally describe him as a dumb, clumsy idiot.
Now it's just a chance to watch some rube try to stick an entire Arctic hen in his mouth.
Oh, so good.
So because thinking is hard and it's easier to boil characters down, Bolin is just the silly one, or the dumb one, or the himbo. But he's a lot more than that. His dedication and devotion to his friends are his most admirable traits, and while I'll bang the drum that Bolin and Korra would have been great together, the fact that amidst all the relationship drama of the first 2 seasons, Bolin and Korra having a very touching and heartfelt makeup scene while still being friends is something we still don't get enough of. I think they really missed an opportunity to make a really good character out of Bolin, and they missed it specifically because they just wanted to make Flanderized Sokka. Okay, be honest with me, does anyone actually like Mako as a character? From the moment he first appeared, he was practically stock anime boy number 77, a brooding, moody little bitch whose voice never broke the same monotone for the entirety of the first season. He was the distillation of a trend for male characters that had been going on for about a decade. He's Attack of the Clones Anakin. Broody, miserable, always with a permanent scowl, and for some reason the lead female characters want to jump his bones. First impressions are important for a character because you've had the entire production season to refine and work on them, and when your first impression is literally nothing, that doesn't bode well for how you intend the character to play out. Bolin starts out charming and outgoing, and as a result gets to do a lot more as a character. Mako doesn't do anything in season 1 outside of being fought over by the only 2 women in the main cast in one of the most soulless love triangles I've ever seen. Korra is attracted to Mako just because, then Mako gets with Asami, and then he just out of the blue one day has feelings for Korra and ends up stuck deciding between the two. And Mako's relationship with Asami is no better. She runs into him, takes him to dinner, gets him sponsored, and then...
I feel so safe with you.
When did that happen? At no point does it feel like there's actually anything developing between them. It feels like a Baldur's Gate 3 romance, where out of the blue, characters are just like, so I feel like there's been something building between us, and you're like, when the fuck did that happen? Even something as simple and shallow as, hey, you're hot, wanna go out, would be better than this. Actually, that's exactly the rapport that Bolin has with Korra. Bolin is attracted to her because... well, I mean, fucking look at her. And through that is invested in spending time with her and getting to know her, and then decides he's gonna ask her out. It's the most natural progression of initial attraction to romance the entire franchise has ever had. Granted, this was a problem with the original series. The best written relationship in that series was Sokka and Suki, and even that felt like it was thrown in there. The two of them are the only ones who were together for most of the show, so things have to be done with them other than dancing around each other. Even barely written romance is a lot better when you just get to spend time with it past its point of commencement. Mako's personality and investment in Korra only really shifts when she's captured, showing an emphatic desire to find her that exists solely to fuel this insufferable love triangle, because the writers already know that shipping is going to be the most noxious part of the damn fan base. And you'd think after getting together in the end that this would all be over, but it seems that Bryke is incapable of actually writing relationships. Again, season 1 was made under the belief that it would be only one, so going into season 2, the writers started hitting the reset button immediately. Korra and Mako are constantly at each other's throats in the most contrived ways possible.
Well,
what?
What do you think I should do?
I guess you should do what you think is right. I support whatever decision you make.
Oh, thanks. That's a big help.
I thought you wanted me to be supportive. Now you want me to tell you what I think? Make up your mind.
Oh. Just forget it.
This episode is brought to you by...
Men, we don't know what we did.
And later on, Mako arbitrarily takes stances against anything Korra is doing, rather tokenly as well. He's just made to be this unrelenting douchebag for pretty much no reason. Season 1 Mako certainly was something of a jackass, but I can't see Season 1 Mako taking advantage of someone's amnesia to take back a breakup like an evil inverse Maxwell Sheffield. The love triangle shit comes right back as Korra and Mako break up. He fucks around with Asami, takes the breakup back when Korra loses her memory, pissing off Asami, and the only satisfying payoff to any of this is at the end they both break up amicably and pretend like an entire season of bickering and squabbling wasn't absurdly one-sided. The writers just don't seem to know what to do with Mako, and they seemingly make him a cop for no reason than just... I don't know, was there a bad boy to good cop pipeline back then? I mean, I guess there was Garrus Vakarian, but like, he was a bad cop who got worse. What exactly is the Venn diagram between people who like smoldering bad boys and people who like cops? Oh right, Padme. I mean, he could have been a private eye, he could have been a reporter, he could have kept working blue-collar jobs, he could have become a member of the White Lotus, he could have been anything, but the plot needs to have some mystery regarding Varric and the false flag attacks to solve, and Mako has that sexy detective look, so he's made a cop just so he can do that while also being stymied by procedure. Because you know what the problem with police is? Too much red tape, that's it. They just threw him wherever he could cause the most crap for other characters. This doesn't improve in season 3. Sure, he's not as adversarial, but he doesn't do anything other than more cop stuff and electrocuting Ming Hua. Though honestly, most characters were ill-served by season 3's obsession with the Beifong family. And in season 4... fuck, what did he do in season 4? I can't remember. I think he blew up the giant robot, but oh right, he's babysitting Prince Wu most of the time. That subplot is so boring I had to go back and watch it a second time because the first time it put me to sleep. It doesn't help that the entire plot with Prince Wu completely undermines the show's attempts to make Kuvira into a villain because... I mean, this guy? Really? More on Kuvira and Wu later, but the show is so lacking in things for him to do that he's just demoted to babysitter. Mako's most admirable trait is actually in his backstory, because when he and Bolin were orphans on the city streets, he took care of his brother. Now, I love sibling characters who genuinely and sincerely love and care for their siblings. Siblings having to act as surrogate parents for their siblings is utterly sad and tragic and heartbreaking, but it's a sad and tragic story that I fucking adore. Mako and Bolin's backstory is like ripped right out of a Tabitha Suzuma book. And that actually means Mako suffers from his actually interesting story happening before the show starts. Reminds me of an old piece of writing advice. Is this the most interesting part of our character's life? And if not, why aren't you showing us that? But the thing is, I really struggle to find an admirable trait for Mako. The lone admirable trait he has is the one he shares with Bolin and gets less real focus. And aside from that, he goes from being an asshole to boring. It's really hard to divorce him from his personality in season 2 because he's such a dick.
How bad can I be? I'm just building the economy.
Now, where Bolin starts out as a fun character and stays there, while Mako struggles for identity the entire series, Asami is somewhere in the middle. She starts out in the first season with only 2 traits, pretty and rich. But then in season 2, after a lot of hard work, she's no longer rich. Her sole reason to exist is to be an obstacle between Korra and Mako by, well, getting there first. And that's not an uncharitable read of her character. As I said, the first season exists in isolation, as this was supposed to be a miniseries. So in the first season, this is all Asami is. Asami is certainly nice at first, and she and Korra alternate between being weirdly catty with each other. And unfortunately, Asami is the less reasonable of the two. After Korra is captured by Tarlok, everyone is turning over the city looking for her, but Mako is especially emphatic about it, and this results in Asami getting jealous. This is, quite simply, the worst possible fucking time to do this. It's not even that Mako is in the wrong here. He has the normal reaction to learning one of his best friends is gone and everyone else is weirdly blasé about it. So to interrupt this as some kind of emotional affair is beyond the scale of unreasonable. You should be just as worried. Never mind the fact that emotional affair is just a fancy way to say having friends. God, you know, imagine the both of them carrying her to the car after they find her. That'd be soft as fuck. Yes, Mako does have feelings for Korra, but outside of one rather egregious moment, he's largely dealing with it. When Mako is putting off red flags, Asami's completely ignorant, but when Mako is showing the appropriate emotional response to learning their friend has been kidnapped by a psychopath, she starts getting catty at this point. The Mako Korra Asami love triangle with a brief Bolin on the side is universally agreed to be the dumbest thing in the show. They should have picked an angle and stuck with it, but Asami's attitude during and after Korra's kidnapping is just completely fucking unreasonable. Even by character standards, Asami has so far been characterized as an extremely nice person. There's no situation where she wouldn't recognize that extraordinary circumstances have extraordinary reactions. The fact that it's only Mako who is this concerned is just more weird on top of that. They should all be this concerned. That's their best friend. I don't know, maybe it's because I play too much Baldur's Gate, but it's always rubbed me the wrong way when shows demonstrate concern for a friend in danger to be an inherently romantic reading. But this on top of a love triangle where everyone acts wildly out of character, even Mako, who never shows this energy at all, is just unnecessary. It's not just that love triangles are trite, it's that this show uniquely forces the issue in a way where there's no Watsonian explanation for this. A common problem with romance as a genre is way too many people view the start of a relationship as the end of the story. The big climactic moment of, I love you too, and then kiss as the music hits the crescendo, and at that point, where do you go? Meanwhile, an established relationship that continues past that point is more narratively satisfying, but not something that lends itself well to big climactic moments for the orchestra to pop the fuck off. Which is a shame because I think any of the relationships in this series could have been salvaged by just spending time with them.
Nothing that is, except marriage.
Okay, well maybe not that one. Asami's story of realizing the truth about her father and having to go against him is actually a lot more interesting, as she's having to go against one of the most ingrained instincts anyone has ever had to deal with. It can be hard to accept that your parent is a bad person. I've watched people struggle with that. The excuses pile up, the reflexive desire to defend someone you love. It's all difficult for people. And Asami has to do the worst possible version of that when she learns her father is a bitter, hateful terrorist. Hiroshi Sato was the one time the Equalists work, showing the kind of deep personal pain that would be ripe for Amon to exploit. But that really interesting story doesn't get to have the same focus as Asami's place in the love triangle because of the aforementioned problem of Bryke being really, really weird about women. Asami isn't in season 2 a whole lot. There's a subplot about her trying to get future industries off the ground, but every single avenue she uses to do that just gets no-selled immediately. Selling mecha tanks to the Southerners is an interesting development, but her shipments are attacked and stolen. She does a sting and she's robbed in the process. Ultimately, it ends up being Varric, but how this affects future industries is left up in the air until season 3. And this doesn't change in future seasons. Asami's largely on the sidelines giving the crew expensive equipment, and in season 4 is the one Korra is writing letters to instead of everyone else. Like Korra's attraction to Mako, her relationship with Asami just popped up out of the blue one day, and that's largely because the exhaustion with the love triangle in season 1 led a lot of people to ship Korra Asami, which was accepted right from the word go as a crack ship because there was no way they would. At least until the 11th hour when Bryke went, hey, let's just do it. And then they did. Kind of. There's a lot of myth-making about how Bryke was planning this from the start, and Nickelodeon pulled the show from air onto streaming because of the LGBT themes, but the show had none. Bryke admitted it was a last-minute decision, and if Nickelodeon had such an issue with it, they would have just told them no, and not pull some weird passive-aggressive mean girl shit. It was 2013. They wouldn't have faced a lot of backlash for going, yeah, no, you can't do that. Most of these conspiracy theories break down in the face of simple logic like this. A studio doesn't have to dance around this issue. If it aired and made it onto the show, the studio signed off on it. Talking about Korra Asami is difficult, as it was the first example of LGBT representation in a Western cartoon. Well, it wasn't, 16 was the first, but it was the first one in an action-adventure series, which are the only ones people care about, apparently. And it paved the way for future shows like Steven Universe and She-Ra to have LGBT rep that was more openly prominent, which in turn paved the way for the Owl House to have LGBT rep that was good. The fact that it was a trendsetter, or at least is presumed to be a trendsetter, is often used to wallpaper over the fact that it's a nothing burger. They hold hands, walk into the spirit portal, and now the show's over. Read the tie-in comics, you filthy peasant. And that's really where Asami's character ends. She's one big ship ramming into other ships. She was supposed to be a mole for the Equalists, but Bryke liked her so much they kept her in as an ally. But after that point, there really was nothing to do with her. I'm actually surprised at how much of a non-entity Asami is. She has her little moments where she gets to show how good of an engineer she is, but oftentimes she's just pushed away from the cast, and especially away from battle, as opposed to Sokka, who not only was a part of battle, but often won them. If it seems like I'm hung up on the romance a lot, that's because they were central to the discussion, and it's not something that the original series was without. Avatar rather notoriously had one of the worst, most violently vitriolic shipping fandoms ever seen. Well, actually, that's not entirely correct, because the actual toxicity came from the fans of a single ship screeching and yelling at everyone else, prompting others to screech and yell back. Avatar's fandom has had a 20-year-long shipping war between Katara and Aang and Katara and Zuko, in spite of the fact that Katara and Zuko interact for about 35 seconds in total before the Southern Raiders, and Katara only gets on good terms with him 2 episodes before the finale. And this was something that sparked hundreds of thousands of words of discourse. When the show ended with Katara and Aang getting together, people were pissed, in spite of the fact that the show was telegraphing that right from season 1, and people still got angry and are still angry to this day. It got so bad to this day, among people who don't ship Zutara, it is everyone's most hated ship, entirely because of the fact that its fan base was one of the worst behaved for a very long time. People often act like everyone in a shipping war is equally toxic, but there's usually one person who started that shit. And like 90% of Avatar shipping discourse is just, here's the latest nutball thing Zutara's fanbase said, and Zutara's fanbase acting like they've been subjected to actual real-world violence in response. It was like Twitter, but before Twitter. I know when we talk retroactively about shipping wars, we're supposed to paint it as mutual toxicity, but that would be dishonest. I was there, and it was Zutara based entirely on the aesthetic of fire, water, bad boy, good girl versus everyone who could fucking read. This is important to bring up because the moment that stupid love triangle formed, the fanbase revolted and started shipping Korra Asami out of the notion of, we are not doing this shit again. And because of that, nobody actually expected them to do it, but it became so all-consumingly popular that Bryke just kind of went, fine, whatever. And I truly believe that had it not been a spiteful move by the fanbase, rejecting one of the worst executive decisions Bryke had ever made, Korra Asami would have never actually happened, because its popularity is the only reason it was ever on Bryke's radar at all. So when you think about it, the outright refusal to go through this shit a second time was the actual trendsetter. So imagine what shipping fandom could do if they directed all that energy spent on genocide apologia and trying to justify incest was instead spent on mathematically formulating the most effective and accurate way to say go fuck yourself to a creator. So part of the reason the crew ends up getting so sidelined is because Bryke seems to be a lot more interested in writing the children of the gang. Tenzin and Lin are major characters in Season 1 and 2, arguably getting more time than the crew does. Season 2 introduces Kaya and Boomy, Aang's other two children, and Season 3 brings in Suyin and her children, most notably Opal. Now, Tenzin and Lin are generally very positively received characters by the fanbase. Tenzin is a multi-layered character who gets to have the time and focus that the crew should have had, and so we get to learn a lot about him, his connection to his culture, his inadequacies, and his daddy issues. Being the lone surviving air nomad after the death of his father must have certainly been a lot of pressure for him to deal with, not least of all being that he was in his 30s and still had no children of his own. Tenzin is actually at the core of a really interesting issue, particularly with Aang, in that he was the lone airbender child out of the 3 Aang had, and Aang favored him over the other 2, rather egregiously as well, as Kaya and Boomy are still dealing with issues of inadequacy as a result.
Look, I'm sorry I didn't turn out to be an airbender like you hoped, but I've tried my best to keep the world safe. Hope I made you proud.
This is probably the most interesting part about the gang, in that 2 of them, at least, turned out to be rather inadequate parents. This was not taken very well by the fanbase, despite the fact that it was extremely in character. See, the average viewer isn't watching media to unpack it for a video essay. Most people don't like consuming media like that, which I understand. People might like watching video essays, but few people enjoy making them, since it's an inherent vulnerability to put your literacy skills out there. So when it comes to how they perceive characters, they operate solely on vibes. There are certain traits and personality types that are coded heroic and coded villainous. So we like morally gray characters, but that moral grayness has to come from things we have coded villainous, like ambition or greed or selfishness or vanity. And the character's arc has to be about removing those things and replacing them with good traits like pacifism and friendship and temperance. So you take Aang, a character who is the poster child for the all-loving hero, a peaceful monk who has a love and respect for all life, even the most vile and heinous people on the planet. He's non-confrontational, he tries to befriend everyone, and he is utterly nice to everything and everyone around him. All of these things scream hero, the most heroed hero who ever heroed, lawful good to the utmost degree. However, all of these things also inform Aang's negative qualities. In Sozin's comment, Aang looks for the wisdom of the past 4 avatars in regards to what to do about the Fire Lord, and his best advice he gets from Kyoshi.
I offer you this wisdom, Aang. Only justice will bring peace.
This actually reflects the view of negative peace versus positive peace, how the absence of tension is different from the presence of justice, which has been discussed by philosophers since the dawn of time. This is probably the most mature and reasoned advice Aang gets. And how does he respond?
I knew I shouldn't have asked Kyoshi.
Aang goes to the very depths of his confirmation bias by asking an air nomad avatar, only to get the biggest dressing down of his life. Yang Chen stops just short of calling him a narcissist for positioning the air nomads above the rest of the world, forgetting that he is the avatar.
But the monks taught me that I had to detach myself from the world so my spirit could be free.
Many great and wise air nomads have detached themselves and achieved spiritual enlightenment. But the Avatar can never do it, because your sole duty is to the world.
He belongs to every nation. The Avatar can't detach themselves like most air nomads can. It would be selfish. It would be borderline evil to be so detached as the Avatar. Now, admittedly, Aang isn't in the same situation as Yang Chen. He's the last of his people. If he abandons air nomad ideals and beliefs, then the air nomads are truly dead. That Aang manages to not do this isn't just keeping his people alive, but it's a deliciously ironic twist of fate for the Fire Nation to be defeated by a pacifist. And while Aang is averse to killing people, he's never been averse to kicking their ass. But this doesn't mean Aang is averse to making poor and even morally dubious decisions. None of Aang's heroic traits are innate. They come from his upbringing among the air nomads and the existential dread of being the last one. So like any good character, the thing that informs his positive attributes also inform his negative attributes. Aang puts the air nomads and air nomad culture above everything, to the point that he's rather softly narcissistic and often has to be bludgeoned into approaching things from a non-airbender point of view. This is the reason he struggled so much with earthbending, because it was the first time thinking like an air nomad wasn't automatically the superior option.
What if I came at the boulder from a different angle? No, that's the problem. You've got to stop thinking like an airbender. There's no different angle, no clever solution, no trickety trick that's gonna move that rock.
And at times he seems to expect that his friends making the right decisions means conforming to air nomad beliefs.
The monks used to say that revenge is like a two-headed rat viper. While you watch your enemy go down, you're being poisoned yourself.
That's cute, but this is an air temple preschool. It's the real world.
It's often a recurring problem with Aang, as throughout the series, his biggest mistakes are the result of sticking so rigidly to being an airbender. His first mistake is the result of thinking like an airbender when he flees the temple to avoid the reality that he's the Avatar.
Typical airbender tactic. Avoid and evade.
So when he has children of his own, he favors the one who is an airbender, because being an air nomad is the single most important thing to him. It's the thing he puts above everything and everyone. And Tenzin was his only child to become an airbender, and so Aang poured all of his attention onto him. To an extent, this is understandable, as after 2 children without airbending, Aang was likely starting to think that his people were going to die after all. However, understandable doesn't mean excusable. It's not really my place to excuse Aang of his actions, that's his children's decision. This is very much in character for Aang, but viewers don't see those things. Because Aang's positive attributes are all associated with traditional heroism, the idea that this could be the reason he makes mistakes doesn't compute. They see a character being nice in one situation and not nice in another and go, And while people often openly disagreed with or chastised Aang in the original, the story often bent over backwards to vindicate him. In Korra, the revelation that Aang favored one child and neglected the other 2 isn't something he is ever vindicated for, because he's dead and can't be vindicated. I think a stronger example of this is how he lies to the Zhangs and the Ganjins in the Great Divide, taking advantage of the fact that they've been fighting for over a century and have forgotten why, in order to fabricate a story to end the fighting between their tribes. A lot of people took issue with this. I mean, Aang wouldn't lie. He's a good person after all. But he's an airbender.
Typical airbender tactic. Avoid and evade.
So to stop a fight, he just makes something up.
I've always tried to solve my problems by being quick or clever.
But lying is bad and Aang is good, so that makes no sense, cries the fandom as basic character analysis flies over their heads. This twisted and deeply simplistic logic affects how people respond to characters. You could dive into Aang's character and find a complex and nuanced web that informs both his sincere kindness and his evasive narcissism, but that's all really difficult and sounds like homework, and it's just easier to go good equals nice. I think this is the main contributor to why Kyoshi has rotted over the years, because not only is she the poster child of chaotic good, ever the most poorly understood alignment, she's voiced by Jennifer Hale. So whenever she says anything, the viewer superimposes other Jennifer Hale roles onto her, which means,
"But I'm through saving you. If you keep attacking, I will stand and watch while the Geth lay you to waste."
Every character who shows any degree of kindness to anyone tends to be filtered into the all-loving hero trope, and once you get filtered into that trope, you're expected to conform to it. People treat characters the way the anime industry treats genres. Once you're in a box, you're expected, nay, demanded, to have all the bells and whistles attached to them. It would be reductive to say audiences don't like it when heroes make bad decisions, but rather, they don't like it when heroes make objectively bad decisions because of character traits we associate with goodliness. They prefer it when bad decisions are made as the result of perceived negative qualities like impulsivity or immaturity or anger or revenge, or the desire to see inconvenient change to an unjust status quo. If a heroic character does bad things, or even makes poor decisions, or even just makes decisions that go against traditional heroism, it doesn't compute with most people and they can't handle the dissonance and they shut down, even if it's completely 100% in character for them. And also, most people as adults just aren't the same people they were when they were 12. Sorry to burst your bubble, grown-ass men still watching shonen. Never is there a greater example of this theory than Star Wars. There's a small subset of Star Wars fandom that really hates the fact that the new Star Wars material is extremely critical of the Jedi. However, the Jedi have been the subject of criticism since day one of the franchise.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
This is the first thing we hear about the Jedi. Where's the Old Republic now? It's gone. The first thing we learn about the Jedi is their greatest failure, and throughout the rest of the series, Obi-Wan and Yoda are repeatedly challenged by Luke and proven wrong. They both believe Vader can't be redeemed because the dark side permanently stains you, and they're wrong. Luke proves them wrong. The Jedi have always served the Republic. What did the Republic do again? Oh right, gleefully become a tyrannical empire and heralded in the death of democracy as a concept without a hint of remorse.
Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy!
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
None of this is helped by the creeping rot of people treating storytelling as a concept as nothing more than a vessel to give catharsis personally to them. So story, characters, themes, all of them get twisted or even thrown away in the name of searching for catharsis. While bantering the idea of a rewrite of Legend of Korra, I suggested that Korra should kill the Earth Queen instead of the Red Lotus, as the Earth Queen had spent the entire season roadblocking the new Air Nation and kidnapping airbenders, and the Avatar is increasingly aware of how tyrannical she is. So my idea was Korra kills her in the name of helping everyone, only for the entire nation to fall into even worse chaos because in her impulsivity, she hadn't considered the consequences of cutting the head off of an absolute monarchy in one fell swoop, leading to her self-imposed exile for season 4 without all the snuff film garbage. And then someone came in running, I would prefer if it was her abused subjects who were the ones to kill her. Like, Korra's still the one to fight her and kick her off the throne, but when it comes to the killing blow, Korra hands the Earth Queen to her subjects, saying that they will cast final judgment on her. And I was thinking in lines of what makes sense for the character and how to get them from one point of the story to another, and this person just went, I'd like all of that to be thrown aside in the name of my proletariat fantasy. And while I understand the proletariat fantasy, it's not in keeping with the theme and the characters, and this is how fandom puts characters into ethical boxes in microcosm. You have been deemed a good person. Therefore, you must conform to my beliefs about what a good person means, and I will accept no deviation. All of this is extremely stifling, as I believe the core tenet of a good character is that their positive and negative attributes come from the same place. So Aang being a crap parent is mwah. I think Aang gets put on a pedestal too much by the fanbase as this pure, uncorruptible, heroic person, so this being a permanent stain on his character keeps people humble. Aang favoring Tenzin also gave him a massive messiah complex. Being the last airbender until he had 4 children and harmonic convergence filled him with an inflated sense of self-importance, one that is routinely beaten down as his inadequacies as a teacher, a spiritual leader, and a master come through in the first 3 seasons. Tenzin ultimately ends up being outclassed by his own daughter, Jinora, who is far more in tune with the spirits than him and mastered everything more quickly than him. Jinora actually beat out her own grandfather as the youngest airbending master in history, earning her tattoos at the age of 11. So Tenzin is often dealing with the fact that the great destiny to revive the air nomads isn't his, it's Jinora's. Similarly to Tenzin, Lin is also trying to hold up the family legacy in a way, becoming chief of police in Republic City as a way to make her mother proud. But Lin is unaware of the fact that Toph quit the police because she realized what a cynical, never-ending waste of time the whole thing was.
When I was chief of police of Republic City, I worked my butt off busting criminals. But did that make crime disappear? Nope. If there's one thing I learned on the beat, it's that the names change, but the street stays the same.
Unlike Tenzin, Lin wasn't exactly raised in a warm and loving home. Toph was a neglectful mother, giving her children too much freedom and using her position as chief of police to shield them from the consequences of their actions. As a result, Lin is emotionally stilted, cold, and often extremely authoritarian in response to the aloofness of her mother. Lin and Korra have a rather adversarial relationship at first, but once Korra impresses her in a pro-bending match, Lin shifts to being the most stifling and controlling babysitter Korra could ever have. In Season 3 especially, once the Red Lotus are free and after Korra, Lin proves to be the biggest barrier to Korra actually doing her job as the Avatar, often talking to her like a parent chastising a child. Like with the rest of Korra's babysitters, I don't care for this, but it is at least keeping with the theme of a controlling authoritarian metalbender. Lin's role in the story is the one that shifts the most, becoming the closest to an outright antagonistic force in the first and third seasons and weirdly absent in the fourth. In the third season, we unpack a lot of the drama with her mother and sister, rather stubbornly refusing to accept that her family are different people now. Lin has been isolated from everyone, ignorant to the fact that she has nieces and nephews, and ignorant to the fact that Suyin and Toph worked things out a long time ago. She stops just short of screaming, "Liar!" and straight up attacks her sister, having wrapped too much of herself in being the only normal one in a messed up family, and confronting the fact that she's actually the one who's done the least growing out of all of them. While this story for Lin is technically good, I actually like it the least because it's part of Season 3's rather tangled mess of subplots that exists mostly to tie up loose ends and drag out the fact that the entire guiding philosophy of the Red Lotus doesn't have enough material to carry out a season on its own like the Civil War for the previous season had. I mean, why don't you try and stretch Get Out of My Room Mom anarchism into 13 episodes? You can't do it, so instead they beam another 4 subplots directly into your eyes. And the one with Lin and Suyin drags on the worst as we watch Lin pull a Mako and not talk about anything until an acupuncturist forces it out of her. This was another episode I had to watch twice during the first draft because the episode was putting me to sleep. Look, I know I'm gonna get flack for this, but let's be honest, I get flack for breathing the wrong way. I just don't give a fuck about Lin. It's not that I dislike her, but oftentimes she's such an obstructive member of the cast, often infantilizes the main character, and her go-to response to people not fitting her expectations of them is to scream and attack. When she attacks Sue in season 3, Sue delivers a line that actually really resonates with me.
Okay, I guess this is how it's going to be.
The resignation in her voice before jumping into a fight, she almost sounds bored. It was at this moment I realized why Lynn exhausts me so much. If you've ever had a sibling like this, who hasn't really matured past the age of 17 and is still having these petty adolescent fights well into her adulthood, you know they're just exhausting to be around. Yeah, her story is objectively good, but I just don't care about Lynn or her problems. Every time she speaks, I'm like, yeah, cool story, down in front. Soo-yin, on the other hand, outright infuriates me, though that's less because of her character and more of how her character is used. Soo-yin as a child was more of a chaotic rule breaker compared to her sister, but in her adulthood founded her own hippie commune out in the middle of nowhere, where she had 6 kids, Batar, Hwan, Opal, Wei, Wing, and later she adopted Kuvira. During the conflict with the Earth Queen, Soo-yin is actually very opinionated about the role of a monarchy in modern society, but simultaneously she has very little of substance to actually say.
I mean, the idea of even having a queen is so outdated. Don't you agree, Korra?
I haven't really thought about it too much.
Well, you should start. The world is evolving and the Earth Queen can evolve with it. Step aside.
Soo-yin doesn't object to a monarchy out of any idea of the people getting to choose their leaders or opposition to autocratic dictatorships. She objects because it's the future. What? And this is never really expanded on, as open objection to the queen is only done by the villains. And in the next season, when Soo-yin has a chance to bring the Great Revolution to the Earth Kingdom, she just doesn't. She operates under the idea that if they do anything about the instability in the Earth Kingdom, that she'll automatically become a dictator. This is one of the worst contrivances I've ever seen to get an unknown character in the antagonist seat. Soo-yin at times comes off as someone with a lot of opinions about life, society, and politics, but would rather sit at her table waxing poetic than doing anything about it, effectively the Avatar version of a bread tuber. And this would be an interesting thing to explore, but they never do. I know discourse in 2024 has more Thermian arguments than the actual Thermians, but the fact that Soo-yin is plagued by inaction and the story never bothers to address it means my interest in her character only goes so far. And then you have Izumi, who's also there. The United Republic is the main setting of The Legend of Korra. It's where our heroes live, it's the main central location of the conflicts of Season 1 and 4, and about half of 2, and it's the big new thing Korra has to show off. Brief floor tangent. So it's 100 AG, the 100-Year War is over, and Avatar Aang is trying to get the Harmony Restoration movement underway, which involves the Fire Nation moving out of the stolen Earth Kingdom land and surrendering it back to the Earth Kingdom. And Fire Lord Zuko is like, great! But then the people who live there are like, actually, I don't want to move, it'll take all day, and I just unpacked. So Zuko was like, actually, I changed my mind, I'm keeping the beaches. And the Earth King was like, what the fuck, dude, and marched his armies into the colonies to take them back by force. And then Avatar Aang, in his wisdom, said, let's create a 2-state solution to a 1-state problem. And so the United Republic was made, a festering capitalist tumor hanging off the Earth Kingdom in the name of not having to pack up and move.
Oh, beautiful for smoggy skies, insecticided grain.
The United Republic is the injection of America into the world of Avatar. Republic City, the capital and only real location in the Republic we see, has small elements of cities like Shanghai and Hong Kong, but it's mostly based on New York. The layout resembles New York, there's references to multiple New York landmarks and locations, and the inspiration from Avatar's Chinese roots is about as token and vestigial as, well, Chinatown, actually. Yeah, it's just New York, and that's not surprising. Smarter people than me have already pointed out that Bright did about as much research on the cultures they were lifting from as the average weeb, which is to say they did 10 minutes of reading and made the rest up. Furthermore, the United Republic is a liberal capitalist democracy, meaning it most resembles the environment the creators live in. This is important because unlike its previous show, which had a rather basic theme of war bad, imperialism bad, Korra is mostly a political show. Every season, except for season 3, there's a new political philosophy to tear apart, and they're almost always compared in some way to the United Republic's democratic capitalist system. Amon is a send-up of socialist uprisings against capitalist governments. Released during the same decade, most people started to wake up to the fact that capitalism is a self-consuming machine that would kill itself if unrestrained, so Amon's entire existence is one long string of Cold War propaganda directed squarely at the skulls of Occupy Wall Street. Unalaq is a spirit-loving traditionalist who gets into a dick-measuring contest with his brother over the direction of the water tribes, until his neck snaps and he becomes a Satanist in the last 5 seconds because his traditionalism was getting in the way of the Southern Water Tribe becoming a mercantile fever dream. Zahir is an anarchist, so he wants his mom to get out of his wants to abolish all government so that mankind can get back to nature and live with the spirits in true freedom. And it later turned out that Unalaq was part of his anarchist band. Fucking what? And Kuvira wants to take back the stolen land from the United Republic, and since the United Republic is the moral center of the entire series, that basically makes her metal-bending Hitler. This would be interesting to explore from the perspective of a nation whose sole concern is continuing its own existence, especially a nation that is technically outside the Avatar's jurisdiction.
The 4 nations are meant to be just that. 4.
But the actual government and guiding philosophy of the United Republic goes rather unexplored. We know it's a democracy, but we don't know the extent to which it's a democracy. It starts with counselors from other nations, effectively a puppet state for everyone else, but then they get their own president with his own administration, but we don't know who beyond the president gets to be elected. We know it has free enterprise, but that's about it. Large companies like Future Industries and Cabbage Corps exist, and Future Industries makes up the primary antagonist of the first season, but after this point, the way in which a private industry was effectively able to fund and equip its own coup attempt isn't really explored. This becomes a problem because the liberal capitalist democracy of the United Republic never has to justify its existence like the rest of them do. In fact, in the very last season, Prince Wu decides to emulate the United Republic in the Earth Kingdom in a rather offhanded remark in a season that probably should have been mostly about that, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. This will be important because the United Republic is Korra's status quo. It's the first thing we see. It's presented as this forward-thinking utopia because it has, let me check here, cars and skyscrapers and rich people, and there's a subtle undercurrent that the rest of the world should be emulating it. But this isn't exclusively a United Republic issue. The show wants to be about big ideas in general, but doesn't explore them in any significant degree. Almost every season is about some grand-scale political issue, but it still has to spend most of its time being a series about elemental martial arts, and that conflicts with the themes of each season, which are about problems you can't just punch. This is actually a well-understood concept called capitalist realism, described by philosopher Mark Fisher as the widespread belief that not only is capitalism the only viable political and economic system, but also that it is now impossible to even imagine a coherent alternative to it. If you're paying attention, you'll notice that fantasy and science fiction worlds tend to almost universally operate with capitalism as their dominant economic system, even if they're taking place in fantasy worlds set long before the emergence of capitalism, or in science fiction worlds where post-scarcity should have rendered capitalism obsolete. In fact, the only subversion of this idea that I can think of without looking anything up is Star Trek, where the United Federation exists in a period where transporters and replicators have to put an end to economics as we know them. Capitalism is as foreign and ancient sounding to most of the Federation as the idea of a flat planet. In most other works, capitalism and American-style democracy is so readily accepted as the norm that even in works where both of these things fall due to their own inherent failings, the main goal of the heroes is to reinstate it as it was from the moment it fell, because the creators simply cannot conceive of any other way of doing things. And that's all over Korra. The moment they introduced a modern-looking city, they immediately oriented it around the world they live in as an idealized default setting that the rest of the world is just naturally moving toward. Oftentimes, other characters will remark on the cultures of the other nations as being inherently obsolete because of modern technology, which is a notion that makes absolutely no sense unless you believe, well, we have radios and cars now, so I guess it's time to swap out one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away. Now, while it sounds like I'm arguing the politics of all of this, I'm actually arguing the imagination. The politics at play in capitalist realism kneecap at the attempts to discuss political issues in Korra by positioning every philosophy as inherently inferior to the United Republic without question. But further than that, it's just boring and uninteresting. Part of the appeal of Avatar was its defiance of standard fantasy settings. Instead of the generic hodgepodge of Western Europe that makes up most fantasy, Avatar was set in a generic hodgepodge of China, Korea, Tibet, and Canada. Yeah, the world building was made with an atlas strewn across the creator's lap and a Wikipedia page open in another tab, and many people have rightfully accused this of Orientalism, which is a subject I'm not knowledgeable enough to cover, so I'm sure you'll forgive me if I don't. But when facing claims that you're borrowing the surface elements of a culture and exotifying the rest like a weeb at the Nintendo store, I'm pretty sure the solution was not to burrow yourself in Radio Punk Manhattan and extol the virtues of private industry. All of this just makes the United Republic very dull. Avatar pretty much never used the same design for any city. The Fire Nation capital, Ba Sing Se, Omashu, Fire Fountain City, Wolf Cove, Agna Kella, they all look very interesting and were designed with their cultures in mind. Given that the Republic was governed by all 4 nations, nations, Republic City should look like it came from all 4 nations. You could have this really interesting look to it, like public transit that resembles the stone monorails of Ba Sing Se, maybe in the process of being upgraded to metal. Buildings with all 4 architectural styles arranged in a haphazardly colorful array. Omashu's unique approach to shipping and delivery. How about most of the waterbenders are living by the coastline? Hell, maybe they built sections on the water using ice as platforms. The whole city should look like 4 architects sat down to design it and immediately started arguing. But instead what we get is a gray and brown steel and concrete desert, filled with cars and all the garbage that usually comes with living in New York City, with nothing particularly unique or interesting to set it apart from 200 other diesel punk settings. The United Republic is just a boring place to be. Every other city in Avatar is unique. You can see a lot of the inspirations they took from real-world locations, but they're still interesting places where people actually live. Ba Sing Se is so interesting, it's like stepping into an entirely new nation from the rest of the Earth Kingdom. I keep thinking about those monorails in particular. Real thought was given to how people actually live and get around in a city populated by millions of Earthbenders. The United Republic has Model Ts, and that's cool if you like cars, but it's kind of a boring answer. In general, the technological leap forward the Republic represents is just the real world's technological leap forward. And yeah, that makes sense from a boring, realistic perspective, but the real world doesn't have elemental karate wizards who can actively shape the direction of technology and infrastructure. I know this is a weird thing to focus on, but I'm weirdly interested in the layouts of fantastical cities, so fuck you. And going from Ba Sing Se or Agnikella to the United Republic is just disappointing. The United Republic is just an oddity because it's a brand new nation that seemingly overnight became a global superpower. Worse even, it's a brand new nation that exists on stolen land, with the people it stole from still very much around to take umbrage with that, but nobody does. The United Republic is just weirdly accepted as if it's always been there. It's not hard to look at the United Republic's unquestioned legitimacy and not think back to the episode about freedom fighters trying to kick settlers off stolen land and being cast as the villain for doing so. The United Republic never once has to address this fact. When someone calls the Republic what it is, that's always taken as the immediate sign of villainy. Season 4 is especially bad about this, as not only do the main antagonists try to launch an attack on the Republic, but earlier in the season, President Raiko flat out admits to installing puppet leaders in the then leaderless Earth Kingdom.
You sure that's the guy you want running the Earth Kingdom? Trust me, we'll be sending a delegation of experienced advisors to handle day-to-day governing.
That's some CIA-level shit, and we just never have to stop and think about it. The Republic isn't the only place this unquestioning acceptance of the status quo is found. It's all over Korra. Season 3 deals with the tyrannical and oppressive Earth Queen who is actively destroying Ba Sing Se with her greed and vanity, but she never has to deal with any shit from the lead characters over it. Dealing with someone like the Earth Queen is supposed to be the Avatar's job. Roku considered it his greatest mistake by not killing Sozin the moment he invaded the Earth Kingdom. The Avatar being the check on power for a world leader going crazy has been the main conflict for no less than 3 avatars. And now Korra just won't do it, and it's never brought up again. It's actually the Season 3 villain who deals with the Earth Queen in a way that is decidedly less graceful and causes more problems. Oh, so perhaps this is a theme on how if you don't take care of a problem, it'll be taken care of a lot worse by someone else? Nope, the Earth Queen is just a problem, and then killing her makes everything worse for everyone? So what's the theme here? Oh wait, I know.
You gotta deal with it!
This happens in Season 2 as well, as Unalaq's primary motivation is to open the spirit portals and bring humanity back into harmony with them after Avatar 1 separated them. And then at the end, Korra does exactly that. So having Unalaq turn out to be a spirit Satanist the whole time feels weirdly tacked on. Season 4 involves Kuvira being the villain for coercing states to join the new Earth Kingdom, but those states are on the brink of collapse and being beset by bandits all day. So what's the good decision here? Just leave them to rot? And then at the end, after Kuvira is defeated, the Earth Kingdom just stays reformed and keeps its autocratic leadership. Sure, Wu plans to implement democracy, but that never actually happens. So if the villains destroy something, you're supposed to leave it that way, and if you try and fix it, you're just as bad as them? Who in the world has that kind of position about politics besides the Clinton administration? A story about how change is bad doesn't work when things end up changing anyway. Furthermore, there seems to be this vague gesturing in the direction of democracy and private industry as the natural evolution of the world of Avatar, yet it's never explored. Characters will gesture to the United Republic as a shining example of how to lead the world into the future. All the while, the Republic is on the brink of collapse from one man with daddy issues and his army of dudes who can punch real good. Su Yin just calls the monarchy outdated and never expands on it, and Wu talks about bringing the Earth Kingdom into a democracy in a rather offhanded remark that screams, this should have been the plot of the entire season. It feels at times like Breik wanted to make a show about the world moving away from kings and chiefs and toward elections, but they themselves actually knew very little about the actual merits of democracy as a concept. They just grew up in one, and obviously it must be the best because they live there. That's how it feels, at least. Granted, the political subtext of the series is often hamstrung by the need to also be an action series about water ninjas blowing each other up, and those two things don't go well together. There's this pantomime of maturity going on, where the series wants to be about complicated ideas, but it doesn't want to give up being a children's ninja cartoon, so it feels at times like those mature anime you've heard so much about, where they splice 3 minutes of the human centipede into the middle of an episode of Card Captors. This rigid adherence to the status quo is one of the main criticisms of South Park, a show ever increasingly the product of two aging white libertarian men shoving themselves away further and further into their ivory tower. Legend of Korra loves to both sides every issue it covers. Starting with,
gotta keep one jump ahead of the bread line, one swing ahead of the sword. I steal only what I can't afford.
So our first villain comes in the form of an equality movement.
Are you kidding me? Out of the gate?
Fucking great start there, Brick. You're introduced to the idea that benders are oppressing non-benders in the city, and you're introduced to it by someone telling you that is the case. But outside of a set of gangs called the Triads, there really isn't any actual oppression going on in the city. Not on a systemic level, at least. So the idea of non-bender oppression is largely absent and invented from whole cloth by Amon and his Equalists. Well, duh, Lily. He's a liar with a personal vendetta against benders. Of course he's making shit up. No, you don't get it. A common argument that bigots in real life often use is that the oppressed are inventing their oppression or oppressing themselves. So using that as a fundamental baseline for a story is extremely fucking disgusting, especially when you rip your entire aesthetic right from the headlines. Amon and his Equalists are a direct parallel to the Occupy Wall Street movement, an organization against economic inequality that began with a 2-month occupation of Zuccotti Park in New York City in 2011 and ended with a march on Wall Street in 2012. This was a serious movement about issues that have only gotten worse since then. So for Korra to take what was at the time a very present movement and turn them into a pack of uncoordinated thugs radicalized by a deceptive con man is bordering on actual propaganda. Korra as a series is really dead set on supporting the status quo in all things, and so any push to change the status quo in either direction is villainized. This has always been the politics of Korra. This show wants to be political, but it doesn't want to take a stance on anything. It reminds me weirdly enough of Pokemon Black and White, where the question of the ethics of training Pokemon is used as a backdrop for one liar's crusade, and I'm left wondering, why did you bring it up if you weren't going to discuss it? The issue of non-bender oppression is often stated as a problem in the city, but we never actually get to see it. Now don't get me wrong, show don't tell isn't an absolute rule, but if you're going to talk about an issue in the city to this degree, I mean it has to exist. Where else did Amon get all those radicalized henchmen? You think we'd have seen it by now? Furthermore, the season eventually devolves into positioning it as two squabbling factions refusing to get along with no systemic power being wielded between each other, like the way your high school history teacher positioned Israel and Palestine. Tensions between benders and non-benders only start rising because of Amon's actions. It's only after he starts committing acts of terrorism that the government starts imposing curfews and locking down the streets. That's the point, Lily. He's fabricating a problem. I'm getting there. Let me finish. See, the problem with the Equalists is that it's so unilaterally focused on Amon, but Amon doesn't work alone. He has wealthy donors, a small army of henchmen, and most of the people outside of Amon himself end up being true believers. So without any tangible connection between some bender and non-bender conflict, where'd all these radicalized bozos come from? They didn't just pass from a membrane into an alternate reality. About the only tangible connection ends up being the Triads, a bunch of gangs operating in Republic City, and a metal-bending police force that can perform some of the most elaborate acrobatics in the world, yet simultaneously can't stop the Triads. That's where the conspiratorially minded would suggest there's some kind of underhanded deal going on. But if you think there's anything in the season suggesting that, there isn't. I just made that up, which is sad because the connection between police negligence making the Triads worse, thus radicalizing non-benders and creating justification for Tarlok's task force, and the way he brutally cracks down on benders would provide not just the best possible justification for the Equalists, but if it turned out that Tarlok was Amon the whole time, that would have been insidious. Like, create a problem in order to crack down on non-benders, and then when they get radicalized, it turns out their own oppressor was playing them on both ends? Man, fuck the whole the revolutionary is a violent liar plot. How about the charismatic revolutionary leader was your oppressor the whole time? That would be a biting critique of the way revolutions often position a single grand leader at their front. Given Amon has inklings of socialism behind him, this would be extremely nuanced. Socialist movements are a universal good. Even if you don't believe in socialism, something's gotta keep the corpos from getting too comfortable on their thrones. See, I've always been of the opinion that communism isn't the result of regulating and strangling private industry, it's the consequence of refusing to do so. There's no faster way to end up in the Soviet Union 2.0 than to let the corporations do whatever the hell they want and radicalizing the people in the process. And while socialist and communist movements in the past tend to vary, it's always the ones that position some thought leader at their forefront that end up turning into violent dictatorships because Well, no shit. Socialism is a movement of the people, and when socialism goes wrong, it always ends up being because someone took socialism and rewrote it to be their own special version of it that positions themselves as working-class Jesus. Bold revolutionary leaders who took power and immediately opened the forced labor camps. So pulling that kind of gambit with the Equalists, effectively highlighting a fallacy of positioning a people's revolution around something other than the people, would be fucking brilliant. Most of season 1 has this almost film noir aesthetic, so going full interconnected conspiracy theory would be genius. It not only solves the issue of where the fuck is the oppression, Mansley, but it also lets you keep him on as a villain while making a much better and more politically biting point without demonizing objectively good movements in the process. There's tons of moments in season 1 that would have supported it.
What you did was tear up the city and impede the real authorities in their pursuit of these criminals.
That's funny. I didn't see your little task force or the cops the whole time.
See, that's what I admire about you, Korra. Your willingness to go to extremes in order to get what you want.
It doesn't take much for Tarlok to start creating an entire apartheid police state right in the fucking city. This would have all led beautifully into the reformation of the United Republic's entire government in the end, because this is next level corruption. But that would have required Bright taking a stance on something. And a big reason Korra's political storytelling is so bad is because they refuse to take a stance on something. It's always this weird golden mean fallacy where we spend an entire season kicking someone's ass 6 ways to Sunday before going, you know, what if they were right a little, but like in a way that doesn't inconvenience us. It almost feels like this was the angle at first, a really interesting angle too, before it all just turned out that this was just Tarlok's brother with daddy issues radicalizing people out of some petty revenge. It's wanting to be political because that makes you look mature and more high prestige, but at the end of the day, they still just want to make a show about elemental martial arts and giant robots smashing up cities. It's the distillation of wanting cartoons to be more mature, but in superficial ways so you don't have to, like, watch something more mature. The closest comparison I can find is Princess Mononoke, a film I would consider the template for this approach to storytelling, often championed by anime fans as one of the best films Ghibli ever put out because of its mature themes. But the actual mature themes in Ghibli's work are found in Grave of the Fireflies or Only Yesterday, which are decidedly bereft of the high adrenaline catharsis of their contemporaries. That's not even to call Mononoke bad, it's just the last thing I would think of if you asked me to name an example of mature animation. There's a conflict between the desire for maturity and dark themes in animation, but also still wanting to make the same action-adventure shows we've been making since the 80s, which is why you end up with political espionage being used as the backdrop for a battle shonen, or a show about anti-fascist rebellion being used as the backdrop for talking about your feelings, or a show about a world-ending battle between the forces of good and the forces of darkness being used as the backdrop for codependent catgirl incest. Ultimately, everything the characters have learned turns out to be meaningless. As the Equalists are defeated by anime fighting, Amon is revealed to be a liar and flees with his brother as they reminisce about old times.
Kaboom? Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
Nothing is actually learned from the Equalist plot. Remember, season 1 was made in isolation from the rest, so the reform in the Republic, their independence, President Raiko, this is all season 2 stuff. Instead, the season ends on Korra being gifted her bending back along with energy bending and the Avatar state, and given Korra's progression as a character, this is oddly brisk. It's a common sentiment, one I've even erroneously echoed in the past, to claim that Korra is given everything. But the truth is, Korra works hard for almost everything, it's just that her hard work and dedication is having to share space with a desire for a big oh shit moment. So instead of Korra actually learning to airbend through practice, she unlocks it at the exact moment the plot needs her to for maximum oh shit! Korra's airbending training stops being relevant about halfway through the season at exactly the moment where she should have started being able to actually use it. But she isn't able to because it's being held back to be the big oh shit moment for the first season. Korra's lost her bending and now Mako's about to lose oh shit! You can almost picture the writing room with Bright going, everyone's going to lose their minds. They're going to be clipping it on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, because it's 2012 and Google+ was a thing then. Now, about that whole thing about how every problem was actually intentional, season 1 is ultimately just the political revolutionary turns out to be a liar plot that the 2010s got really into. The problem is that every other possibility for this story to have taken, either Amon being serious and there is a problem in Republic City that Korra has to accept and deal with, or Amon is secretly Tarlok running some secret conspiracy operation, are both way more interesting. Korra took a villain that at the time was very novel and chose to take the most boring and and safe route they could. At every avenue, they had the opportunity to do something really unique and cool, and willingly chose not to. And this will continue being a problem for the rest of the series. Fire Lord Ozai was a pretty damn simple villain, but because of his simplicity, they could do a lot of cool things with him. The tension between his family, the conflict with his children and his brother, the way that the war is the distillation of the previous Avatar's failures. All of it is very interesting, using the simple story of an invading evil empire as its foundation, and it's a very solid foundation. Amon and the Equalists take a complicated idea and at every avenue chose to simplify it further and further, and that's just tragic.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Wasted potential will be the order of the day going forward, sadly.
I am the righteous hand of God, and I am the devil that you forgot.
Of the four main antagonists in Korra, Unalaq was my favorite up until the second half of the season. So I'm going to be referring to pre-beginnings Unalaq and post-beginnings Unalaq as separate characters for reasons that will make sense in a little bit. Unalaq is the chieftain of the Northern Water Tribe and the de facto chieftain of the Southern Water Tribe as well. The Water Tribes in Avatar are unique in that, unlike the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom, they're two separate nations with separate cultures. But during the war, the Fire Nation had nearly destroyed the Southern Water Tribe to the point they're living in an almost post-apocalyptic state. The Northern Tribe committed a lot of its resources to rebuild the Southern Water Tribe, and by extension their chief became the South's chief. Because of a number of factors, namely being rebuilt during a time where the United Republic was coming into power, the Southern Tribe was rebuilt into a more secular, mercantile civilization and have slowly drifted toward economic growth over cultural growth. The Southern Tribe has more in common with Republic City than any other nation. They even use the same currency, the yuan. This has created a problem for the South, as the Water Tribes are situated near the spirit portals and as such have a unique relationship with the spirits. So the Southern Tribe's abandonment of its older cultures have caused the spirits to become increasingly angry, to the point there's a permanent blizzard around the Southern Water Tribe's spirit portal. This, for the first half of the season at least, is the reason Unalaq is in the South Pole at all. Spirits are rampaging like crazy, and the Avatar is supposed to be the one dealing with it, but Korra was never trained in spiritual matters for reasons that still make no sense. Actually, Lily, Unalaq is— we'll get to that, hold your horses. For the first few episodes, the main point of conflict is between Unalaq and Tonraq, Korra's father, and Korra ends up getting caught in the middle as Unalaq tries to appeal to her for help with the spirits, and Tonraq keeps inserting himself into the matter. In fact, Tonraq ends up driving Korra further into Unalaq's clutches by being almost physically incapable of showing the Avatar any respect whatsoever. He hides things from her, tries to control her, inserts himself into conversations with her teachers, and seems to do everything but have any faith in Korra's ability at all. This pisses Korra off, and it should. It pisses me off. Unalaq ends up being the only one who actually trusts her as the Avatar.
What is it?
I guess I'm just so used to people telling me how to do things that I forgot what it was like to have someone trust in me.
Korra, all the past avatars live on inside of you. Let them guide you. Let them help you find the light in the dark.
This is genuinely one of the sweetest moments in the season. It makes me depressed that Unalaq is the villain at all. The plot could have just been about the long-standing damage to the South Pole by the 100-Year War, and about mending not only the damage to the North and South spirit portals and the tribe's relationship with the spirits, but the tribe's relationships with each other, and maybe also the two brothers as well. The first half of the season has a sibling motif, with the B-plot being about Tenzin's dysfunctional relationship with Bumi and Kaya. Tonraq and Unalaq are arguably the main characters of the season, and the North and South tribes are often referred to as sisters. All of this is wrapped up in a problem that Korra can't just punch. This could have been one of the best stories Avatar ever told. It would have just had to commit to something that a lot of animation fandom considers to be taboo. Not having a villain. Not having a big high-stakes anime fight at the end. Actually using the world building you care so much about. But not having a villain is just unthinkable to some people. Even if it would drastically improve the storytelling because you don't have to bend and twist everything around so that two action figures will throw rocks at each other, the response is going to inevitably be, but villain, no. Some of the best works of animation I've ever seen have no villain. Encanto doesn't have a villain. Only Yesterday doesn't have a villain unless you count urbanism as a concept. A Place Further Than the Universe doesn't have a villain. They're all amazing. We had an entire phase where Disney films were increasingly ditching their villains to tell more emotionally gripping stories. They should have done that here. It's not like anyone liked Unavatu. The entire fanbase collectively decided that Unalaq and the Dark Avatar were the worst things Avatar ever created. Then again, a lot of them thought Zahir was the best villain the show had, so, you know, the fandom isn't exactly operating on an intelligent wavelength. This isn't even suggesting you have to do away with all of Unalaq's flaws as a person. I actually really like the Civil War storyline because it's completely in character with his desire to bring back the spiritual center of the Southern Water Tribe. You can understand why he wants the North and Southern Water Tribes to be unified as one nation. He thinks it would just be better for his people overall, and you can also understand why the Southern Water Tribe would rather maintain their own cultural identity. Even though one side is objectively in the right here, Unalaq has more to say for himself as a character character in terms of how he thinks. It's more than just shouting slogans. He rediscovers a bending technique that has been lost to benders for some time. He's clearly done a lot of work communing with the spirit world, and even suggests that their proximity to the portals makes water benders inherently more in tune with the spirits than most other benders. If they had stuck to this, it would have been so cool. Even if ultimately Unalaq had to lose because independence is always better than assimilation, you'd have had people debating that outcome for years. And I think the reason they didn't stick to it was because it was too debatable. Audiences will often claim they like morally gray conflicts, but they tend to balk immediately once presented with one because oftentimes the decision comes down to personal politics. I really like the conflict of the Civil War, even though I've already firmly staked aside. The argument can be made that unity is better for both tribes, and I don't have an argument against that. More nuanced than I don't care, no to assimilation. But I don't think a lot of people like doing that. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've experienced that when it comes to ideological battles like this, people really don't like having to pick a side simply because of the idea that they could be wrong. The internet loves to argue subjectivity all the time, but that's usually just because fans feel entitled to be agreed with. In a situation like this, someone would have to ideologically pick a side without the immediate reassurance of which side is the correct one. And in the middle of the season, they might pick one that loses. So instead, all of that interesting character work that could have put Krew to shame as a character was all, and say it with me now, a fucking lie. The brilliance and nuance of the first 3 episodes ends up being a falsehood, as it turns out not only did Unalaq get Tonraq banished from the Northern Water Tribe, but had effectively jury-rigged the trial against the rebels to both get them out of the way and seem merciful enough to keep Korra on his side. Up until this point, Korra's ability to get Unalaq to otherwise take more reasonable measures was one of the main examples of why she not only will be a good avatar, but that she already is. She's mitigating a situation that every side involved would love to see escalate for good or ill. With the revelation that this was all Unalaq's desired outcome, Korra is instead recast as a rube, being easily manipulated by obvious villains. The idea of Tonraq and Unalaq both being increasing problems for the stability of their tribe, both with good intentions but both letting their dysfunctional relationship get the better of them, is really interesting. It's the best part of the season, but because that's too complicated, Bryke throws it away at the first possible opportunity by making everything just a big elaborate plot by Unalaq, right down to Tonraq's own failings just being more shit Unalaq manipulated behind the scenes. Just like with the first season, there was the chance for a really interesting approach to the story, and instead Bryke chose the most boring version of it they could possibly tell. The way in which Unalaq and Tonraq have such a poor relationship and it ends up getting the tribes caught in the middle blended so well with the B-plot of Tenzin, Kaya, and Bumi and their dysfunctional relationship. Watching the first 3 episodes of the season, I was on the edge of my seat in a way that I haven't been since KOTOR 2. Then the judge confessed everything to Korra and I deflated completely.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
So, on to the worst part of the season. After Korra fails to get aid from the United Republic, she tries to go to the Fire Nation for help, because that's not a terrible idea that will cause a global diplomatic incident at all, but she's intercepted by both Eska and Desna, and then later a Dark Spirit, and she's knocked out and washes up on the shore of the Fire Nation island. In the process of healing herself, Korra is made to have a vision about the first Avatar, Wan. And just like how Lion Turtle Deus Ex Machina ruined what was otherwise an interesting personal conflict for Aang, it's about to further ruin an already ruined story. Look, a lot of people like beginnings. Out of everything in Korra, beginnings is considered by many to be the best part, but the reason for that is because it's a self-contained story with its own 3-act structure. It's a reminder to an audience that doesn't realize it that episodic storytelling is just inherently more satisfying to watch, even if serialization is considered more prestigious. So I understand why almost everyone loves beginnings. I've been banging that drum since serialization started becoming more widespread. But in the process of getting there, you're given a massive lore dump that completely retcons everything Avatar has established up to this point. Who is the villain of The Last Airbender? On a conceptual level, imperialism. Who is the villain of the first season? A charlatan. Who is the villain of the third season? A greedy monarch and a short-sighted moron. Who is the villain of the fourth season? Literally every single country ever victimized by settler colonialism ever. Who is the villain of season 2? The devil. The fucking devil. As we learn, the great spirits of Rava and Vatu are in a constant battle for dominance every 10,000 years to determine whether the world will enter 10,000 years of puppies and candy or 10,000 years of diarrhea forever. Now, the conflict between Rava and Vatu is a lot like Republic City. Just like how Republic City is 10% Hong Kong, 10% Beijing, and 80% New York City, Rava and Vatu are 20% Zoroastrianism and 80% Christianity. Moral dualism never really had its place in Avatar. Things were always more complicated than this, but this is twice now Bryke has used moral dualism to write their way out of a more interesting, more complicated, more nuanced story. So sure, while Vatu has some similarities to Ahriman, an evil Zoroastrian spirit, let's not kid ourselves, this is the devil as an evil kite.
looks like you could use some help from the big boss of hell himself.
Vaatu and his very existence completely reworks the entire season. You remember how all this started with the Water Tribe's lack of respect for the spirits, resulting in angry spirits? Turns out Unalaq has been controlling them the entire time, and has been communing with Vaatu in an attempt to free him, become a dark avatar, destroy the real avatar, plunge the entire world into 10,000 years of chaos and darkness, and why? Good question. They never actually explain that part. Well, they do later on. They claim Unalaq was part of the Red Lotus, and this was all part of their plan to enact a really dumb, nonsensical anarchism, but that's really stupid, so I'm going to ignore it. So the season started with a very complicated, multi-layered issue between independence and cultural identity versus the Water Tribe's duty to the spirits, wrapped up in the dysfunctional relationships of multiple families, and we've ended with...
You see, darkness is the heart's true essence.
Like every single fucking animated show that professes to be mature, actual maturity is too much for anyone involved to handle, and so they just revert back to a shonen anime. A show sets up more political subtext than any series would ever have the balls to do, and the end result is a shitty version of a Kingdom Hearts boss fight. Why does this keep happening? Why do so many shows do this? Trying to be this complicated and nuanced story, but then at the last minute chickening out and just going with, and then they use the power of friendship to defeat Mega Satan. It's the stakes. The stakes get so high, and they don't need to be this high all the time. You had a really good idea to start with, but because it was a quieter and more meditative idea about an issue the Avatar couldn't just punch really hard, they just threw it away. Korra's entire arc is about learning she can't just punch every problem away, but the story always ends with her punching her problems away. It's this idea that they have to keep one-upping themselves. Avatar ended with a big explosive bending fight. 3 of them actually, but those fights were the capstone of a multi-season long character arc for everyone involved. In one case, it's just tragic. Korra tries to end on an even bigger fight, but the person she's fighting has their motivation and character change more frequently than Sylvanas Windrunner under the pen of a sexual predator. Furthermore, we've now reached the point of a big colossus stomping around a city. What are you gonna do next, Bryke? Make the colossus even bigger? Make its spirit laser beam even bigger? Oh wait! For all of Season 1's flaws, one thing I commend it on, still, even in the face of a terrible ending, is the fact that this was supposed to be the only season, and they went, okay, let's do a film noir thing, a kind of detective show crossed with political sabotage. It was a risk going so low stakes. Sure, they fight over Republic City, but that's one city and they still fight with guerrilla tactics. Lowering the stakes like that lets the audience come down from the adrenaline high. If they kept the entire story this way, it would have been really healthy long term. Then in the next season, they go back up to where they were at the end of The Last Airbender and then go even bigger. For no reason. Again, like Season 1, you had a really cool thing going here. Why did you not follow through? Every route you could have taken with Unalaq in the Civil War, and you drew in the worst possible route in fucking crayon. You set up something cool, you set up interesting characters, and then right at the moment you have to pay it off, you retcon everything, and it turns out they were a liar the whole time. What reason does anyone have to trust you at that point? You'll do it again, and we know you'll do it again. The next 2 villains, they do the same thing. Every interesting thread set up with them is abandoned in favor of the most boring ideas possible, all in the name of the characters not having to think about things too much. At this point, it's just shit or get off the pot. Either stop making political stories if you're gonna just shonen your way out of them, or go ahead and make a political story, but stop being such a goddamn teenager about it. Because what we end up with is just considerably less interesting than what you'd been setting up. I should point out this season also introduced Varric, a skeevy war profiteer who jumps onto the side of the rebellion after Unalaq threatens his business, and then tries to rob Asami's business blind for the sake of control. Then he starts not only making propaganda films to get the United Republic to send their armies to the north, but also these weird false flag attacks to further radicalize Republic City. And it all just fails? He's ultimately caught, and even when Raiko believes there's a problem, he still won't do anything about it. It feels like Varric was part of an earlier, better draft where he ultimately ended up being the real villain before the Dark Avatar shit was brought in. And a few seasons later, he jumps right on board with developing a weapon of mass destruction. After this sudden swerve, he's suddenly treated like a silly little boy, doing his silly little boy things. Oh hey, he said do the thing. He's so funny and quirky and silly and adorkable. He has the blood of thousands on his hands. Oh man, he's in a platypus costume. He's so silly. He's enriching himself off the characters we actually like. In the final season, he jumps at the chance to make a giant death robot, the epitome of how unbelievably stupid this show can be when it forgets to establish the villain as a villain, and then suddenly has a change of heart at the last minute, and we're expected to think Kuvira threatening to kill him is a bad thing?
Now there's a voice in my head telling me to drop you on the tracks.
That voice is me, Kuvira, do it. Varric is actually one of the most opportunistic, duplicitous motherfuckers the series has, but outside of a few confrontations, he never gets elevated to villain status because of what he represents. sense. Back in the mid-2010s, it was common to romanticize the idea of the eccentric billionaire because Tony Stark, really. The MCU was only a few years old, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark was really cool, and so tech bro billionaires were really cool. Hell, Varric is literally just Tony Stark in boy drag. But hindsight is 2020, and we all know at this point Varric isn't a quirky guy doing quirky guy things. He'll probably try to buy the press for 40 billion yuans because it was making fun of him. Varric would definitely build cars to rival future industries, and they would all explode immediately upon being bought. Hell, he spends a lot of the season making propaganda films that turn Unalaq into a literal racist caricature, which is actually the second time they did that. Bryke, what is it with you and Ming the Merciless? It's weird seeing Varric be so beloved by the fandom entirely off the words "do the thing." This would be like romanticizing Eska's relationship with Bolin, outside of the adrenaline of the end of the world, I mean. Season 2's biggest, most critical flaw is the one most people utterly refuse to recognize, that it feels like it needs to have a villain. This story could have been done without one, where things are just complicated and messy and both chieftain brothers are letting their animosity and stubbornness escalate matters. But because the prevailing attitude at the time were that villains were utterly crucial to every story that ever exists ever and are the real protagonists, it shot itself in the foot. Even today, media discourse is utterly fixated on villains to the detriment of everything else. Villains are great when they fit, but if a story would be better served without a villain, then forcing one in out of a sense of obligation is only going to make the story worse. Case in point, The Legend of Korra. There is not a single season in this show where the fact that they feel obligated to have a villain doesn't ruin the story in some way. And we're getting right into the worst of that.
All the other kids with the bomb-time kicks, you better run, my God.
Moving into Season 3, we actually have a very strong start. Harmonic Convergence has changed the energy of the world and not only seeded spirit vines all over Republic City, bringing some green back to that asphalt desert, but it's also showing that the Republic is a pack of jackasses as Raiko starts beefing with Korra over the fact that the consequences of saving the world are mildly inconvenient for people. However, it's also seeded new airbenders all over the world. This leads to Korra having a heart-to-heart with a new airbender on top of a bridge, showing what I still consider to be Korra's best moment as she gently and calmly talks someone off a ledge.
Please! I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to hurt anyone!
Tell me about it. Look, I know you're scared. You've gone through a big change, and it's kind of my fault. There are other airbenders, and they want to help you. Actually, they're really excited to meet you.
I don't want to be an airbender. Please, you're the Avatar. Make it stop!
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, but wait, that's not true. She has energy bending. She could totally... Let's just have something nice in this show.
But I promise you, things will get better if you just give it a chance. Let me take you over to Air Temple Island and we can talk this through, okay?
This leads Korra not only getting banished from Republic City, great job Raiko, but deciding she's going to help gather new airbenders and rebuild the Air Nation. Now, if the season had just been about this, because the airbenders end up being a catalyst for a conflict with the Earth Queen later on, it would have been very interesting. Season 1 had lowered the stakes from the last airbender, Season 2 raised the stakes so high the stakes burned up upon re-entry into the atmosphere, but this is a great way to lower the stakes again with a more emotional story. Unfortunately, the first episode ends with some dangerous criminal getting airbending and declaring that the era of the Avatar is about to end for the second time. This is Zahir, whose entire shtick is reading a manifesto written by a 17-year-old school shooter.
A land of the truly free, damn it! Every man will be free to fight his own wars!
For the next few episodes, the crew travels around the Earth Kingdom collecting new airbenders while Zahir runs around getting the gang back together. By the time they reach Ba Sing Se, it turns out the Earth Queen has captured every airbender in the city and locked them under Lake Laogai to train as a new airbending division of the military. In fact, the Earth Queen remarks directly to Korra's face that the United Republic is on stolen Earth Kingdom land. So you might be thinking, hang on, this sounds like a really interesting conflict for the season, with the future of the Air Nation being at odds with the Earth Queen and her bitterness over the Earth King's stolen land. So what the fuck is with the Linkin Park bending squad? Well, in case you haven't noticed, Korra likes to do this cheeky little thing where they lay down the greatest premise you've ever seen and then bam! Slap a generic shonen anime on top of it. So while they're searching for the airbenders, Lin shows up and says, time to be the babysitter again, because apparently a fully realized Avatar can't take on 4 mercs. The obnoxious part is that they're still talking past Korra, and we get our second retcon as to why Korra was locked away in the compound. The Red Lotus tried to capture her when she was a kid, but were stopped by Tenzin, Tonraq, Zuko, and Sokka. So Lin wants to get Korra out, but Korra refuses to leave without the airbender, so they break them out of prison. And congratulations for paying attention this long, because this is the last time the the Earth Queen is relevant to the plot. The story focuses primarily on the airbenders for the next few episodes. Now, in the past, I was down on the whole harmonic convergence creates new airbenders thing. I feel it's weird to just magically undo genocide, but further than that, if you wanted to create new airbenders, you already have the air acolytes and an avatar who just learned energy bending. But honestly, I can get over it considering how good Tenzin is here. Tenzin is delighted to learn about new airbenders to the point he's brought to tears over getting to do something his father dreamed of. It's a genuinely heartfelt moment for Tenzin, and I like that. But doing it this way reveals cracks in the air nomad culture. The air nomads were so in tune with their spiritual side that every air nomad was an airbender. There were no non-benders in the air nomads. But there are now. The air acolytes are non-benders who are part of the Air Nation. But for some reason, they're always weirdly discounted. It's only the arrival of new airbenders that sparks the rebirth of the Air Nation, as opposed to a boon for a nation that already existed and was growing from the start of the show. Granted, this was always a running undercurrent for the air nomads. One of the reasons the air nomads traveled all over the world is to be of help to everyone, which says something about how the air nomads viewed other cultures as needing their help in the first place.
Everything's here, even the pelts. Yeah, nothing's cozier than dead animal skins.
Aang, please put that down. It's ceremonial and very fragile.
Was it you or Dad that put an octopus on your head and convinced Gran you were a water spirit?
In a world oriented around bending, being the sole nation to have 100% of its members be benders would certainly influence how they interact with the rest of the world. The air nomads have always been kinda arrogant, viewing themselves as above the world and its problems. This is all stuff that requires you to read between the lines, and I was hoping that Korra would address that.
But maybe there will be enough to fill the temples again.
The temples are full. You were there just last season. You saw the air nomads living there, but they aren't benders, so they just don't count.
Excuse me, a little help here?
Sorry, I thought you were the servants.
We're Tenzin's brother and sister.
Avatar Aang had other children? The world is filled with more airbenders?
We're not airbenders.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Despite giving their entire lives to the Air Nation, they're just a lesser class of people. If only we hadn't swept the whole benders versus non-benders thing under the rug. Imagine that, huh?
You know, just because these people can airbend, it doesn't automatically make them air nomads.
Tell me about it.
The part of the season where the Air Nation is actually training largely deals once again with Tenzin and his inadequacies and being outclassed as an airbender by his daughter. Tenzin seems to be struggling with the fact that while he can be a great teacher, he's not the greatest airbender in the world, something he had to deal with last season as well. And Tenzin is used to training his children, who were born and raised air nomads. His new batch of recruits are all adults and teenagers, who balk at the idea of having to work hard at something and want to be good at it right away. We're also introduced to Zaofu, a city devoted entirely to metal bending, led by Suyin Beifong. This introduced the second act B-plot of Lin and Suyin's dysfunctional relationship. The one scene I'd like to highlight as especially good is a very quiet scene where Korra gives Opal Beifong introductory airbending lessons. Not only is it a show of how far Korra has come, a moment that is sadly rare in the series, but the gentle movements coupled with the flute music. God damn. If I had never seen this show and you showed me this scene and said they were setting up Korra and Opal, I'd believe you. But she actually shows attraction to Bolin, which is good. Opal has good taste. Zaofu at times feels like a hippie commune, and Suyin will accept fugitives from other nations, which means Barrick is here hiding from the United Republic and trying to build a hyperloop. The reason she's in Zaofu at all is because as a child, she got arrested and Toph sent her away to keep her daughter from going to prison. Suyin getting away with no consequences and scarring Lin in the process has been the reason Lin has avoided her entire family. And while in Zaofu, it starts eating away at her until she ends up in a physical altercation with her sister.
Mom and I already talked about this years ago and worked things out. If you had gotten together with us like we'd asked, you would know that I'm a different person now.
You think just because you live in a big fancy house and have a chef who cooks you fancy food that you're a different person? Maybe you can fool everyone else, but you can't fool me.
You know what, Lin? You're the one who hasn't changed. You're still a bitter loner who only cares about herself.
Huh, I'm getting this weird sense of deja vu. Then Lin passes out for a full day and she and Sue patch things up and Opal gets to go with the Avatar to the Northern Air Temple. Anyway, I hope you like that subplot because it's over now, because that night the Red Lotus shows up, drugs Korra, and tries to kidnap her and starts a full trench warfare fight in the middle of Zaofu.
We have you surrounded. It's over. Release the Avatar.
Making a mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg.
This leads to a manhunt where everyone is trying to figure out how the Red Lotus got into Zaofu, where the lead characters flail around while Mako and this one Zaofu guard do all the real work. All this leads to...
I'm taking you back to Republic City where I can protect you.
If I wasn't safe here, then I'm not safe anywhere. I have to stop them.
It's too dangerous. You are not going.
Stop trying to protect me! I'm the Avatar! This is my job!
As irritating as the Babysitters Club is, I'm glad that Korra's just not having that shit anymore. The crew ultimately leaves to go find the traitor, a truth seer named Aiwei, which leads to Korra going into the spirit world where she finally gets to see Zahir face to face. And so we finally get to hear what Zahir has to say and what his stake in all of this is.
The idea of having nations and governments is as foolish as keeping the human and spirit realms separate.
You've had to deal with a moronic president and a tyrannical queen. Don't you think the world would be better off if leaders like them were eliminated?
You're batshit insane!
He wants to tear down all world governments, plunge the world into chaos and true freedom, and return humanity to the spirits. I gotta say, Bryke, after 2 seasons where you take an interesting philosophy and water it down to something simple and stupid, it's nice to see you actually working with something on your level for once. Anarchism is the laughingstock of the philosophical world. Oh, there have been plenty of noteworthy anarchist thinkers who have managed to collectively achieve jack fucking and shit. I mean, communism managed to establish itself in several nations at least. Granted, you'll rarely ever meet an anarchist thinker in real life. It's usually anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-communism, or anarcho-syndicalism, which is to anarchism what an aluminum Christmas tree is to a forest. Zahir does wax poetic about freedom a lot, but his true purpose is pretty simple. The Earth Queen has been established as a tyrant, and he exists for no other reason than to murk the Earth Queen. Which kinda sucks, because if you wanted someone to murk the Earth Queen, there's already a character who is more than capable of doing that, and who already has had personal dealings with the Earth Queen to the point she's driving them crazy. So they're both capable and willing to do so. It's a little side character in the show that most people don't quite remember. Her name is Avatar Korra, a character who has previously not been opposed to extrajudicial murder. Given how much of Korra's arcs as a character is about her impulsivity and how often she acts without thinking and isn't prepared for the consequences, Korra being the one to kill the Earth Queen and throw the Earth Kingdom into chaos after thinking she was doing everyone a favor would be beautiful. It even leads into her self-imposed exile in the final season a hell of a lot better than the current canon, where she was off her groove after being turned into a brown and blue pinball. We get into season 4 and everyone's like, Korra, you have to stop the evil tyrant, and she's like, I already did that, and I made everything worse. This is double the case given that Avatar has dealt with the Avatar's refusal to stop a problem world leader before he happens. And Hu Ting isn't like Ozai. She doesn't have bending to take away. Her ability to hurt people is systemic. And as we've seen, the Dai Li is the real power in the Earth Kingdom. The Queen doesn't really matter. I just came up with that on the spot. I know you're probably thinking, Lily, the hero's not supposed to kill people. Yeah, let's tell a story about why that is. Oh, but no, we need to drag around Zahir while he rants to his mother about how he's not going to tidy his room. It's interesting just how superfluous Zahir is to the story. The fandom seems to think he's the greatest antagonist the show had because he suffocated a woman, and I guess that's badass or something. But season 1 had multiple bloodbenders bloodbending outside the full moon, and bloodbending is like the coolest technique in Avatar. So like, step up your game, Zahir. You're right next to a lava bender, the world's hottest firebender, and a master waterbender who waterbends with no arms. Even Unalaq post-lobotomy in Kuvira had more on-screen presence than you do. Then again, all those characters were good characters before the story snapped itself in two to force a villain into existence, while you are boring right from the start. So we don't even have a better version of Zahir to work with, because the better version of Zahir is Korra. In the end, once the Earth Queen is murked, it's just several episodes of the Red Lotus using blackmail and the threat of another Air Nation genocide to capture Korra and torture her into the Avatar state so they can kill her there and end the Avatar for good, a task they ultimately fail at due to Deus Ex Genora, all of which is done through multiple overly long bending fights that sees Pali, Minghua, and Ghazan all die, while Zahir is taken in alive. None of it is particularly noteworthy unless seeing someone get electrocuted to death makes you excited, and without a real story to tell, the actual fighting is just fighting. It may as well be an episode of Death Battle. Going back over season 3, it's probably the messiest. It takes a very long time for the main antagonists to show their faces and do anything. And once they do, it's one speech about "get out of my room, mom," and then regicide. And the season keeps swapping out new plot lines every few episodes, and then has to very loosely tie them all together. It seems like Bryke thought, well, nobody liked our social revolution villains, so we'll go back to just bending fights. But the problem with the first 2 seasons is you had interesting ideas, and then threw them away so you could go right back to anime fighting. And season 3 is just the anime fighting. This isn't an improvement, it's just the boring latter halves of the season with actual promise. I maintain what I said, the whole season would be better if it was just about the new Air Nation and them crossing paths with the Earth Queen, ending with Korra getting fed up with Hu Ting's bullshit and killing her herself. I remember the Red Lotus being more of a presence with plenty of weird dipshit anarchist rants, to the point that my previous video had me bring up the point of power vacuums multiple times. But no, it really is just 1 or 2 and that's about it. They are a non-presence throughout the season until it's time for a fight scene. They're like Team Rocket by way of Zack Snyder. They aren't characters, they're just boss fights. Ozai had more character than the Red Lotus. Fucking Zhao had more character than the Red Lotus. It seems the Red Lotus appeal among the fanbase lies entirely in the fact that season 3 is the most violent season. Characters get suffocated to death, Korra's torture porn scenes are even more torture porn than before, Minghua dies of electrocution on screen, a character commits suicide on screen, someone's head gets exploded, Korra gets beaten up so badly she ends the season in a fucking wheelchair. This season's a bloodbath. Which does answer my question, when animation fandom talks about things getting more mature or serious, it's usually getting closer to a level from Doom. Zahir is the distillation of what Avatar fandom thinks a good villain is. Talks a lot of philosophy, but not in such a way that means the main characters might not want to anime fight their way out of it. Unalaq written properly would have been one of the best antagonists the franchise ever had, but he also would have been boring in their eyes because when do thing go boom? All in all, Zahir is just blowing a lot of hot air.
Tell her how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lakes of Gillishan.
So the Earth Kingdom was thrown into complete anarchy when the Red Lotus murdered the Earth Queen and has been split up into individual states that are constantly beset by bandits and warlords. Plans to get it reunited and quell the anarchy have been underway almost immediately, with everyone originally wanting Suyin Beifeng to lead the reunification movement. However, Suyin reneged on that idea on the basis that she doesn't want to force her ideas on others. And like, Suyin, they're asking you to help people being assaulted by every jackass with a spear, not become a dictator. In the wake of Suyin's unwillingness to actually do anything, the movement was spearheaded by Kuvira instead. Yeah, remember that really nice Zaofu guard from the previous season who was carrying the entire team? Yeah, she's evil now, I guess. She's been leading an army of soldiers, engineers, diplomats, and researchers as they go from state to state, clearing out the people causing misery and bringing them back into the newly reformed Earth Kingdom with the intention on reinstating the monarchy. It's been 3 years, and Kuvira has brought most of the states back under the banner of the Earth Kingdom with only a few left to go, and it seems that 3 years of bringing every state back into the kingdom is starting to wear on Kuvira because she looks like she needs a nap. Now, throughout the last 3 villains, I've made the point of saying that Bryke's belief that the need to have a villain has actively hamstrung most of the stories in Korra. All of them are about things that are better served without the need to make one party solely in the wrong to protect their precious status quo. The Equalists would have worked better as a genuine equality movement or as a conspiracy by the United Republic Council, but having them turn out to be a rube army for a scammer was just the least interesting route they could take. Unalaq and Tarlok were practically set up for an everyone sucks here kind of story, with extremely good parallels to the B-plot of Season 2 with Tenzin and his siblings. Zahir is completely superfluous, and his role in the story regarding the Earth Queen would have been better served by Korra herself. Kuvira is the one where even people who are critical of the way Bryke writes villains will go, okay, this one works, because they just made her metal-bending Stalin.
That all said, I do wish Toph got to slaughter Kuvira. Yes, Toph dragging the metal-bending Sozin was everything, but I crave the blood of fascists.
But weirdly enough, it takes a long time for that to establish itself. Characters are generally spreading rumors about Kuvira, but that's all they end up being for about half the season. And all Kuvira really does to support it is lecture a guy and smirk. Given that so far every villain has just been a psych, it's actually opposite day, I will admit I was half expecting there to be a twist here, but no, she did all that shit.
Maybe you need to spend some time in a re-education camp.
I thought that's where we send people to learn new trade skills.
Hard truths, Bolin.
Kuvira is actually the most missed potential. This is a story about the Earth Kingdom in a period of upheaval, with someone deputized to bring the people back into a place of security and relative safety from an army of roving bandits. All with the aim of putting a spoiled little princeling back on his throne. The same throne that had been oppressing the Earth Kingdom for years. The same throne multiple characters in the previous season, including the Avatar herself, throw scorn onto. And now you have someone who isn't a world leader or important figure leading the charge to protect her own people and being expected to hand the reins of that over to the same people who caused this problem in the first place. And doing this during a time where the Avatar herself is nowhere to be seen. Kuvira could have been a walking representation of the frustrations of so many people. Frustration at the monarchy, at the Red Lotus, at the Avatar. Hell, Kuvira was there to see Korra get brutalized and left in a wheelchair. Maybe she's not angry with Korra. Maybe part of the reason she took the reins on this project was to give Korra time and space to rest and recover. Now you have the contrast of a normal person trying to do something the Avatar was previously doing. Would certainly explain why Bolin is there. Furthermore, several states don't want to be a part of the new Earth Kingdom. We get to see one of those states in the early episode, but that state is falling apart. That leads to interesting conversations about freedom versus security. Does the leader of a state have the right to turn away aid if that aid is the only thing keeping his people alive? Does freedom extend to people willingly choosing to destroy themselves? Should you just let them do it? Maybe each state ought to have a referendum, and if you're doing that, you're already making making a case for democracy as a concept.
You have a lot of pride, but it cannot protect your people. Your pride will not stop the hordes as your city crumbles to the ground. And your pride certainly will not feed your hungry when all that is left is rubble.
The answer to all of these questions are probably yes, but taking the time to consider them would be interesting. Anyone who's ever had to deal with a friend who's high 24/7 will tell you that you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. In fact, there's an even better angle to take because it's the United Republic itself spearheading the reunification of the Earth Kingdom, with the intention of putting Wu on the throne, and Raiko straight up admits he's sending advisors to do all the real ruling.
You sure that's the guy you want running the Earth Kingdom?
Trust me, we'll be sending a delegation of experienced advisors to handle day-to-day governing.
And it's the United Republic who gave Kuvira the reins on this project at all after she retook Ba Sing Se. So already the states have a very sound reason to not want to get involved with Kuvira. She's directly operating at the behest of the United Republic in the aim of re-establishing an oppressive monarchy that will become a puppet state for the Republic. That's some CIA shit going on, so I can certainly see why an individual state would be like, yeah, we're not doing that, you fucking rube. I'm not the only one noticing this, right? Like, the United Republic is up to some shady shit in this season, and we just leave that there. Kuvira's reasoning for reneging on the deal is on the basis that the monarchy was terrible, and they want to put it back?
Tell your world leaders to stay out of Earth Empire business. We won't accept their hand-picked dictator.
That's the kind of thing that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but...
Trust me, we'll be sending a delegation of experienced advisors to handle day-to-day governing.
No, the United Republic literally admits to doing it. I talk about how this show tends to establish something really interesting and then proceeds to go set up another Frieza, but now we're getting into shameless, underhanded power grabs by a rogue state, and the season isn't about that? Did nobody notice that because it didn't have a dramatic camera pan or ominous musical sting? All of these things would certainly make for a great story, especially with Korra coming back in the middle and having to get caught up on the last 3 years she missed, but it would necessitate, once again, the plot not jamming forks into its eyes to avoid thinking about these things. It would necessitate not ham-fistedly shoving a villain into the story. It would necessitate everyone's stance on the situation all being kinda bad, because none of them have had to deal with instability on this scale. But that doesn't big boom make pretty though. This is a season that ends with a giant death robot going Godzilla on Chinatown, and if that doesn't tell you the wavelength the creator's on, nothing else will. They build a giant death robot with a frickin' laser beam attached to its arm. This is what Evangelion would have been if the creator hadn't gotten depression partway through. Oh, and it's offhandedly mentioned in Reunion that Kuvira's been putting waterbenders and firebenders into concentration camps, because, yeah, just throw in some concentration camps as an aside. Oh yeah, speaking of throwing things in, you remember how in Season 2, Esko was weirdly dragging her brother around everywhere, even on double dates? And the only time she actually went against her father was when Desna got injured? Well, they actually make a joke about how that looked to some of the fandom.
I'm afraid there's been a mistake, Your Eminence. We have you and your brother booked in the same room, with only one bed.
It's no mistake. Desna sleeps in the tub.
Haha, funny joke, right? Kuvira's actually engaged to her brother. Kuvira's backstory involves her being adopted by the Beifong family, with tie-in comics later cementing this with her being referred to as Opal's sister. So this means her and Baatar Jr. are siblings. And this is just sitting there. Nobody brings it up. We don't unpack it. At no point does anyone say to Baatar, dude, what's your problem? Oh no, I'm sorry. Baatar does say something about it.
You're going to have to get over your grudge with her. I'm sure you've heard that we're engaged. She's going to be an official member of our family.
Really nice to know what Bryke thinks about adoptees. And all Baatar really amounts to after this is showing how far gone Kuvira is by trying to laser him in the face later in the season. It's like everything else Kuvira does, it's just offhandedly mentioned, and then we go back to watching Korra be bounced over the horizon. You know how people often say Korra walked so Steven Universe could run? Well, I'm not certain I'd agree with that, but it certainly did run so She-Ra could sprint. And all of that's a shame because out of every villain in the series, Kuvira's the only one who was just a regular person who stepped up when someone needed to. She had the potential for such an interesting perspective that no other antagonist could ever have. She grew up in a place where everyone was free to live how they wanted while also living in relative safety. Why wouldn't she want to bring that to the rest of her home? It doesn't even have to be without issue. I'm not saying Kuvira's the good guy, actually. My favorite moment in this series is when Kuvira and the governor are arguing, because it's the distillation of what usually happens when leaders get into power struggles like this. Two people jockeying to be the one with the controlling stake in a region, while the actual citizens are caught in the middle. I could certainly see Kuvira growing less patient and more controlling the longer the entire project goes on. This is certainly not the first fiefdom that's been stubborn about accepting her help, but just going the route of the power went to her head, she's putting her dissenters into camps, she's exploiting states for their resources route is so boring. Again? Like with every other season, if you want to be about big ideas, actually be about big ideas. This isn't anything new in storytelling, it's been a cliche for over a decade now, but Korra was one of the earliest shows to go, hey, Magneto was peak fiction actually, and it arguably started a trend. Korra is at least partially responsible for inflicting Ruby on the world, and Bryce should have to spend a few years counting pennies at a bank for that. Some people get the impression from me that I don't like complicated villains, but that's only partially true. I think the more complicated a situation is, the less something as simplistic as a villain fits the narrative. Okay, while I was editing, I realized I need to clarify that statement. There's a belief among a lot of people that real-life villainy isn't simple and is inherently complicated, but it's straight up not true. Real-life villainy is some of the most simple and black and white shit you're ever going to see in your life. Some people think the greedy businessman who only wants more and more money is a cartoon character, but no, that's literally how capitalism works. Look into the history of a serial killer, and 9 times out of 10 their motivation for their crimes is misogyny, and the 10th one is racism. School shooters often leave fascist manifestos behind detailing how much they hate women and/or non-white people. As teenagers, we're taught that instability in the Middle East is the result of many different people being unable to get along. As an adult, you learn that instability in the Middle East is a result of the US funneling weapons into a rogue warmongering state. The Korean and Vietnam War were the direct result of the US and the Soviet Union using other countries as pawns in their political dick measuring contests. We're in a period where we have presidential candidates talking about how much they want to bang their own daughters, and we're still going to pretend that villainy is complicated? The idea of an equality activist going too far, or an abuse victim turning around and becoming an abuser, are actually so rare that I would consider making one of them into the villain in your story to be straight up slander. People take these things into real life. These are things some people actually believe because of stories like this. So the more complicated your story is, the more trying to force it to bear the weight of a villain is going to be a bad call. Either you've seriously misjudged the situation, or you need to get over this attachment to villains as a concept. Kuvira is such a weird case because every character in the season is some level of a jackass. Raiko's pulling some Netanyahu shit with Prince Wu. Before Kuvira announces the Earth Empire to the world, we get an extended montage of Wu being the most unfit sack of shit imaginable, who nobody should trust with power. Su Yin straight up refused to do anything when the Earth Kingdom fell into anarchy, and Korra's been backpacking across the Earth Kingdom tripping on Mercury. You can't show me every main character being the worst versions of themselves and then have this happen.
I'd like to make an announcement to the world. The Earth Kingdom is no more, and from here on out, this man has no authority.
And expect me to go, oh my god, she's gone too far. Because do we have to choose between an idiot king and an evil dictator? Having to choose between evil and stupid is what we elect new presidents for. I guess the intention is that we're not supposed to see Raiko's advisors as a power grab, because the United Republic is portrayed as the most advanced and enlightened nation on the planet, so them installing a puppet leader in the Earth Kingdom didn't cock any ears back in 2014. I mean, I covered this show 7 years ago and I'm only just noticing that part now. A big part of what's wrong with Korra is just how politically juvenile it is, and a lot of its positions were poor positions back in the early 2010s, but they're even worse now. The United Republic probably sounded like a good idea in 2012, but it sure as fuck doesn't now, in a time where most of the audience for Korra is very much aware of how settler colonialism tends to play out in real life. So this final season being between metal-bending Mao and the world's dumbest pack of yokels isn't exactly that thrilling of a conflict. The only really fun part is the fact that, well, if I could be a little juvenile myself, Kuvira's cool? She's the most imposing antagonist the series has had, keeping control of every situation, making mincemeat out of most people trying to take her head on, and even fighting the Avatar and winning. In a less weird series, she would have been an antagonist I would be actively excited about seeing get bounced off a curb. This was why Ozai worked so well as a character. He's imposing and threatening and so deliciously hateable you're just looking forward to Aang kicking his ass. Some people think it's bad to think a villain is cool or badass, but the fun of a villain when you have them properly is hyping up that final confrontation. My favorite point of comparison is Xehanort, a villain who spends an entire decade giving you more and more reasons to want to pound his face into the dirt, and then you finally get to, and you hear that boss music, and Rage Awaken starts playing, and you go, this is my boss theme, bitch, and it's the greatest moment you've been teased for 13 years for. That's a villain. See, that's a fucking villain. Kuvira, outside of the mess that is the story, has all the hallmarks of one of the best villains Avatar has ever had. She's not just imposing and threatening, she's also just a smug bastard. She takes huge gambits with the other characters and outplays them constantly.
Looks like the Avatar is a little off her game.
That little fucking dance, you asshole. This is where I end up conflicted because everything about the story would work so much better if Kuvira wasn't a villain, but Kuvira as a villain is fucking fun. She's the first fun villain the series has had. It's like her presence was written first and then stuck in the worst possible place for her to be. She's like if you took Irenicus and stuck him right in the middle of Disco Elysium. In fact, I can think of another character who would have been a much better suited for Kuvira's role as a villain, even with this story. A character who has been portrayed up to this point as controlling and authoritarian to a degree that can come off as extremely worrying, but for whom most characters would be hesitant to accept because of their pre-existing relationship with them.
You think just because you live in a big fancy house and have a chef who cooks you fancy food that you're a different person? Maybe you can fool everyone else, but you can't fool me.
If Lyn had been the one reuniting the Earth Kingdom, she would have gone totalitarian in minutes and not hesitated about it. Lyn has such a need for control and stability that it often ends up going to her head, to the point she even tries to play controlling mom to the Avatar of all people. Lyn already had the personality profile to become a dictator. All she would need is a little push. Hell, everything I said before about Kuvira potentially giving the Avatar space to recuperate goes double for Lyn, to the point Korra would come home, see what's happened to one of her mentors, and be genuinely conflicted. How would you feel if someone who professed to care about you not only went against everything you'd ever believed, but did it in your name? Damn it, I gotta stop writing fanfiction in my serious critique videos. See, that's the problem with Korra as a property. It's trying to be two things that don't go well together. My example above with Lyn is the only way you make a traditional villain work, and you do it by deprioritizing the politics and focusing on character-based storytelling. But instead, the show wants to be political at its core, and every season starts out doing that very well. But sooner or later, the compulsive need for a villain undermines all of it. It's hard to get invested in a story that starts out with the frictions between cultures trying to assert their own unique identity and ends with defeating Satan with the power of believing in yourself. At times it feels condescending, like they don't think you're smart enough to realize how much they've chickened out of the very ideas they set up in the first place. Hell, the series tries its best to act like it didn't do that.
What did Amon want? Equality for all. Unalaq? He brought back the spirits. And Zahir believed in freedom.
I guess.
The problem was, those guys were totally out of balance, and they took their ideologies too far.
This is the writers straight up lying to you. Amon didn't want equality for all. The whole plot of season 1 is that he's the biggest fucking liar on the planet. He wanted to destroy bending. It had nothing to do with equality. Unalaq didn't bring back the spirits, Korra did. Unalaq was going to destroy the world and remake it in chaos. Zahir believes in nothing, he's just ultimately following the rest of the agenda of the Red Lotus. An agenda so nonsensical that its canon is that nobody knew what the hell their grievances were. It may have been how those stories started, but it certainly wasn't how they ended. They didn't take their ideologies too far. Their ideologies either changed or were revealed to be nonsense. The show acts like it actually stuck the landing with their own antagonists when it just didn't. It shows that Bryke really thought they achieved something here when all they did was chicken out, and they think you, the viewer, are too stupid to notice that. Some people think you're supposed to engage with the story on its terms, so if it thinks that's what it was about, then we need to treat it like that. But people only ever say that when a story they like is being criticized. Execution is still a crucial aspect of critique, and Korra fumbled the execution hard. Furthermore, can we talk about how weak and philosophically lazy They Took It Too Far is as a villain story? This is just the horseshoe theory. I know Avatar has always been about balance, but that shouldn't be balance between oppression and no oppression. Virtually all the villains are in some way about tearing down the establishment in varying degrees, so no wonder a lot of people tar the show as being pro-status quo. Some of its defenders think the show was divisive because it was political. No. I think if it was political, as in actually taking a stand on something, it would have been great. But it wasn't. It certainly likes to use political trappings, but that doesn't make it political. It keenly lacks any degree of political literacy. Even having bad politics would have been better. This series has none, and you can't have it like that. If you're going to be political, you need a stance, and if you don't have one, don't be political. Instead, it does this under the idea of making the show appear more mature and dark to a fanbase that's getting older yet still hasn't aged out of battle shonen. Hence why the political subtext goes hand in hand with the increased gruesomeness of the violence. But the key to maturity is being bold, taking a bold stance, not just in politics, but in storytelling as well. And Korra was practically begging for something more meditative and forward-thinking, not to just set an Occupy Wall Street banner on fire and then get back to anime fighting. All in all, The Legend of Korra takes Avatar and proceeds to gentrify it. It adds pretty-looking modern cities, it adds nice, clean, utopian metal-bending paradises ripped right out of a Tech Bros CGI bullshit project, it adds plenty of American iconography, and proceeds to break and bend the world of Avatar to fit into its mold. Granted, Avatar was never never all that unique in the first place. The series was rightfully called out for Orientalism in its design, but the solution was to do it better. Not proceed to make, like Americans, nuke half a country and then rebuild it into something more closely approximating them. The solution was to let your new cast stretch their legs and find themselves, not bury them under shackles, chains, and constant references to the original series. Some people will say, you just don't like it because it wasn't like The Last Airbender. But the reason I don't like this show is because it tries too hard to be The Last Airbender. It says, here's our bold new ideas. Now let's throw that away so we can take you on a guided tour of Last Airbender nostalgia. If Avatar is going to continue, which it clearly wants to, it can't keep doing this. They're already teasing the next Avatar taking place in the modern day, and I gotta say, if we don't learn from Korra, dial back the stakes, focus on the characters, and get your ducks in a row before you start blowing up the planet, this is just going to get even worse. And that's Legend of Korra. A show with so much promise and so many interesting new takes on not just Avatar, but traditional adventure stories, practically smothered under the creator's unwillingness to commit to any of it. Under the fear that if it wasn't just like the original and didn't have enough references to the original, people might stop watching. And that became a self-fulfilling prophecy, as its unwillingness to commit caused its ratings to plummet to the point it was moved into the streaming ghetto and languished there. And in a twist of beautifully dark irony, despite the romance being the most hated part of the show, that's now the only thing it's ever really remembered for. And I find that a shame, because at the very least, Korra herself deserved way more than to just languish as a pinup for the internet's muscle girl fetish. I'm Lily. Thanks for watching.
No TV, movies suck. I'm here with my gal. Shake your hands, kick around. Wear a suit to breakfast. Underwear that laces up. All girls have a guy's haircut. Crank your car to make it start. You will die of measles.